We have a first, a review, and a bunch of news you don't want to miss this week on the Indy Ball Report podcast. We're back again this week, episode number 204 of the Indy Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, he's Will, and we have a first on this show, which is to say we have a car cast this week.
A car cast. That is true. That is true. I mean, I am currently driving in the middle of the night from Boston after watching the Celtics lose. First time ever at TD Garden, watched them lose, and now driving back so I can call Hofstra basketball against their rival Stony Brook. But you know what? That's the grind, and we're here to talk about Indy Ball.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the whole 30 minutes we were talking before we started recording, which was how the Celtics do, and the whole root cause of just kind of deciding, going to go up to Boston, but hearing that they lost to, what was it, the Pacers, right? And
no, the Phoenix.
Oh, okay. Well, see, that's a lot better than losing to Indiana.
Yeah, Phoenix is a good team. I mean, they didn't play well. I mean, it's just sad. It's just disappointing. I mean, I've watched the Celtics for 15 years, and I've never been to a Celtics game in Boston before tonight. I was really fired up, and then they lost. It was tough, but you know what? It's still a fun time, and I guess there's worse things than having your team as the best team, the best record in all the NBA. In fact, when I say that it could be worse, you could have Kyrie Irving request a trade on your team once again. The Celtics could be that team, but they're not, so it's okay.
I like to see the Nets are catching strays here. That's always good to see, and yeah, I mean, all things considered, it could have been worse, and we're still finding a way to get this show done, too. So, I mean, that's a real positive when you think about it like that.
That's right. And, if I crash, you guys will probably hear it.
Exactly.
It'll be great content.
It would be fantastic content, but in all fairness, I probably wouldn't upload to help you out with the insurance claim.
That's true. We don't want to give the insurance companies ammo.
Exactly. Like that, I could just ransom it on you. You're like, well, so how much is not releasing this episode worth to you?
I know, exactly.
But yeah, I guess at that point, we should probably just dive into the news here and stop rambling for a bit, because we do have a lot of news. We have 6 pages worth of news and review to get through today. So hopefully it won't take more than 10 minutes a page, and we'll be able to keep this reasonable on the timing. But who knows, and I guess we'll only find out as we go along here today. But we get started in the Pioneer League, and we start with the Rocky Mountain of Vibes, a team we haven't really talked about in quite some time here, mainly because the last time we really talked about them was saying their season got significantly better when they no longer had to work as a farm team for a LMB team. But now they
funny how that works.
Yeah, it's funny when you're able to go ahead and get players and try to win games that you start actually winning games. But in any case, They do have a new manager, and it's a guy that's, I say, fairly well known to the Indy Ball scene, and a guy that's fairly well known in baseball as a whole, and that is former Major League pitcher Les Lancaster as the manager from now through the 2025 season. He was a former major leaguer from 87 to 93, various teams here, most notably with the Cubs, though. Wound up pitching in Indy Ball from 96 to 01. He managed an Indy Ball for a decent amount of time there, 99 to 03. Yes, that overlaps with some of his playing career as well, as a real player-manager type, and then 05 to 2010 as well. That's through a variety of leagues, some that you've heard of, some that we haven't even heard of. So, there's that, and there is experience in the Pioneer League with Les as well. He was the pitching coach with Ogden last year, Ogden being one of the better teams, although they went out in the first round, I believe, to Grand Junction, if I'm not mistaken there. So, there's obviously a lot here. There's a lot of interest here. I'm going to be very curious to see how the Vibes do in their first real season of being able to, not really have to worry about a lot of, I guess for lack of a better term, a lot of outside factors when they could just focus on winning.
Yeah, I know. I think that it's definitely a good thing that they're kind of out of that situation with that. I don't even remember the exact Mexican team, but I think that out of the partnership where you're just worried about winning games. With a manager that has a lot of experience in Indy ball, of course, the major league playing experience is a plus. And, granted, that was a long time ago. But I think that there's a lot of Indy ball experience and real Indy ball experience, like from quite a long time ago. So, it's a interesting hire. And I think that, I think things are definitely trending up for Rocky Mountain for sure, which is really good to see. And I think it's definitely a solid hire for them.
I absolutely agree with that. And the team that they had it with was, and if I'm not mistaken, I may have to fact check myself here next week, but Monclova Aceros, I believe is what it was.
Yes, that was them.
Yeah, I hope I got the pronunciation right on that. But it definitely is trending upwards, and this is a solid hire too. You get a guy that kind of knows how to captain the ship here, and I feel like too it kind of blends like the newer and original styles of managerial hires. I think we talked about this a little bit last week when we were mentioning who was it, Billings, when they hired their manager. I think it was Horton that they hired, and we said how. Last year they went ahead. You had your Rigglemans, you had your Bobby Jenks, you had a handful of other really well-known guys. And now it seems like we're starting to regress back to lesser-known guys, still baseball guys, but a mixture of younger guys and guys that have been around for a little bit, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it feels like Les is kind of like the perfect compromise there. He's the guy that knows Indy ball. He's been around it for a while. Yeah, he may have been in and out of it over the last little bit, doing various assignments and doing various things, but he was with an Indy ball team in the Pioneer League as recently as last year via his pitching coach experience with Ogden. So he's also got the major league bit. He's got the Indy ball bit. He seems like a pretty good guy to help navigate this landscape and really kind of take the vibes from where they currently sit. That's kind of like, I don't want to call them bottom tier team, but certainly not a real threat or contender in the Pioneer League, and try and guide them on that upward trajectory. Because all that really takes, especially in a league like the Pioneer that uses the halves, is just a really good, 35 game run. If you can go like say 25-10 in one half, you set yourself up really, really well to win the half and secure a playoff position.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what gives a lot of those teams with the managerial hires a lot of hope, because you don't need a huge, massive overhaul. It's not usually like years worth of projects, and you're kind of building for the future. Maybe the way you would in the Frontier League, or maybe the way you would in the American Association. You can have those quicker turnarounds in the Pioneer League, and granted, without being, a minor league team for Monclova. I mean, I think that helps a lot, because I honestly can't remember, Nick, one example of an Indy ball team that has actually benefited from that kind of partnership. I can't name you one. So you can definitely get it turned around. And I mean, that's certainly no guarantee that they'll turn it around with a new manager. But I think with a lot of experience and roster building for a long time, I think it's a pretty solid hire for Rocky Mountain. Absolutely
there. I really like it. I also like the fact that it's a deal that takes them through the 2023, 2024, and 2025 seasons. Having that 3-year run, I think it really helps with the stability of everything. And I understand the Pioneer League is also a league where, it's younger guys. That's what they want. It's always going to be kind of revolving door of faces. But even still, to have that kind of carryover is nice, and to really have the kind of network and to have some stability there, I think is a really solid thing as well. I
think the only thing I want to add there is just that it is interesting to see a 3-year deal announced per se. That's not really something. There's oftentimes a lot of the teams like to do their kind of staff announcements, including some that we'll talk about later in the show too. But you don't see usually a lot of contract years for managers and whatnot disclosed. I think for the most part, because I believe they're just usually, when more often than not, 1-year deals, and you kind of just move from year to year. So I guess that part of it is interesting. But yeah, you don't really see you don't see a lot of teams, especially in Indy Ball or not just the Pioneer League, but anywhere, kind of announce a 3-year deal for their manager.
Yeah, no, it definitely is an abnormal thing. I think it varies from team to team, because I know right now I'm like putting together the manager off-season hiring article that I've been promising for like 3 months now. I'm actually started putting work in on that, and I started doing it earlier today actually. And so I'm going through and I'm trying to find like, okay, let's go through who got signed this off-season, who's still here from past years, who's signed extensions. And the extensions are normally where you get the years. Normally it's just like, okay, we're hiring a manager and it's like a 1-year deal. Like for a perfect example is like Joliet with Dan Slareth. We typed them up a lot in last week's show. And so I just kind of assumed at some point, like either an extension was announced or that it was a multi-year deal. I went back and I started looking. I can't find anything that says he's still the manager. He's listed on the website. But in the formal announcement from, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, he got announced at the end of February 2020. It just says he joined. It never said for what. I just kind of assume he got extended because I have not seen him get signed anywhere else. So they just normally don't really announce these types of things until you get the extension. Now, I will say it's been changing a bit as of recently. I think that's something that's I've noticed too, especially as I started doing the research and everything. And you start looking in, it's like, okay, it's like, hey, we signed to a 3-year deal or a 5-year deal. But a lot of times, that's only getting announced after the guy's already been there. So it is a little bit surprising to see that. I'll agree with you there. Well, like that's not a normal thing, even if it's becoming normalized.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see how that kind of continues to shape in the future. But yeah, I'm not that it's a bad thing, but it's interesting for now, especially Nick, because I mean, I'll bring up like a college football example. Like you see all these extensions like through like 2045 or something like that. Yeah. But it never actually goes to then because like a college coach will never be in the last year of their deal because then they'll be a lame duck and they can't recruit. Yeah. So, but something tells me that Pioneer League teams or any Indy Ball teams are not going to be able to pay like contract buyouts if they like to terminate a contract soon or like pay the salary of 2 managers or something. So he'll be there at least 3 years. Yeah, something tells me that these contracts aren't very guaranteed either. So it's kind of like, we're just deciding to go in another direction. Best of luck to you type of deal. So long and good luck. But yeah, so it definitely is. And I do also think by announcing it too, it's a vote of confidence as well. And I mean, also playing in Colorado Springs helps out a lot too. I think it's probably one of the more, I don't want to say metropolitan areas in the Pioneer League, but it's probably more well known in that regard. And it's a nice place to live, which is, I don't want to call it a significant advantage, but if you have multiple offers in the Pioneer League, where do you live comes down to it. You're going to spend the summer in the city. So like, you want to have somewhere decent. So there's that. Only other bit of news to add on to the Lancaster hiring is that David Peterson will join on as the pitching coach. I believe he was the manager in Ridge Run last year. And Raphael Malconi will be the hitting coach. Jason Hurst will be an assistant coach on the team. So that looks to be the full lineup for them, which is important as we go to the next bit and final bit from the Pioneer League this week, which is their announcement on their 2023 tryout camp. There is going to be 2 tryout camps, one in the East, one in the West. Both of them are $500 if you get in on the early bird registration, which is before the end of the month. So before February 28th. If you go on March 1st or later, it will be $600 to register. Full details are available on the Pioneer League website. It will be linked in our show notes. And if you want to go over to the website, indyballreport.com, go to the show notes tab, scroll to the bottom of the page, and find episode 204 for that link if you want to do that. Camp 1 is going to be in Florida that's your Eastern camp. That is going to be March 30th through April 2nd. And then the second camp is in Arizona, April 17th through April 20th. So
3:30 through 4:2 for the Florida camp, and 4:17 through 4:20 for the Western Arizona camp. Like I said, exact details, locations, and everything you need to know will be there. I will say that there will be a draft following each of these camps, though, and I believe it's 10 players will be drafted. So I believe each club will sign at least one guy. Now, granted, we also know how these drafts go, where a lot of times you'll draft a guy and the visa issues won't be sorted out yet, so you still got to solve that. Or, you get to camp and then you don't really last more than like a week or two in camp. But, I mean, hey, an opportunity is an opportunity. And if they keep doing this stuff they're doing with Yacker Tech and Baseball Cloud, it's certainly an opportunity for you to go out and, kind of show what you have.
Right. I mean, not all drafts are created equal, and not all draft picks are created equal as well. But, I think it's a good opportunity, especially in the Pioneer League, where those showcases are kind of more important than a lot of the other leagues in trying to find talent. So, they've done this really every year of their existence. I mean, the other leagues do it as well. But definitely, I think a little bit more important in the Pioneer League, per se. I guess in the Frontier League, in the sense they're trying to find values in rookies in the Frontier League and the American Association as well, make it important too.
Yeah, absolutely there. But with the Pioneer League, though, I will agree. I think it is a little bit more important because of the stringent rules. Going over the Pioneer League eligibility rules, they do list this on the tryout page itself, but it says, and quoting, to be eligible to play on a PBL club's active roster, a prospect shall have played no more than 3 years of professional baseball. For the purpose of calculating prior years of baseball experience, 1 year of professional experience is defined as follows. Position players, 45 games played. Starting pitchers, 10 games started. Pitchers in general, so whether you're starting or relieving, 25 games played. Professional experience includes previous play in all professional leagues, domestic or international, but does not include the leagues in the Caribbean Federation, the Australian Baseball League, or any other leagues that might become winter ball leagues. So I take that to mean, your Venezuelan leagues, your Nicaraguan leagues, Central American leagues, Caribbean ones, as they mentioned. So Dominican, Cuban, I don't know if there's Haitian leagues, but I imagine they would count as well. Australia wouldn't count. There's leagues like that wouldn't count, but obviously.
I've never heard of a Haitian league. Is there one?
There may be. I mean, it's on the same island as the Dominican Republic, although the Dominican Republic's significantly better off than Haiti, but now we're getting into geopolitics, and I don't think we want to venture into there. But, any case, like winter leagues wouldn't count, but I imagine a lot of the Pioneer League talent is from college and those kinds of ranks. So I would also say if you are, say 23, 24, and you're going to be graduating sometime soon, or you're on pace to, or something along those lines, basically at the point where you may want to start looking at professional opportunities. Before you go to the camp, I would probably say to check with an NCAA compliance officer or the school to say, hey, if I go to this tryout, does that count as a professional opportunity or professional tryout or something like that? How would it affect my eligibility? Because obviously this tryout is not worth giving up a full year of eligibility. That just is not a good decision there. So, and being that you'd be in the end of March, April, you'd probably be middle to end of the season. So I would definitely say, to check there if you were interested in that.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and the NCAA is just notorious for being so forgiving in situations like that.
Oh yeah, well, it depends on the school. Some schools are treated a little bit better than others.
I could switch that to a Rutgers rant, but I won't. There's
that comes later.
Only one Rutgers rant per Indy Ball Report. Those are the rules. I don't make them.
I enforce them with an iron fist, though. So
that is true.
With that said, I think we kind of covered everything in the standard tryout news. You can go ahead and you can check everything. Make sure you bring your own equipment to the tryout as well. And if you're an international player, I think you need a P1 visa. And you're responsible for getting the visa, not the teams, not the league, not the organization running the tryout. It's on the player to get the visa. So that's something that's important. Also, they're going to have ice water there for you too, but bring your own lunch. So it says that players should also bring their own lunch each day.
I love that ice water will be provided.
Yeah, no, the exact thing is, will there be refreshments provided for players? And the answer goes, ice water jugs will be provided. Players are encouraged to bring their own personal water bottles that can be filled up, although disposable cups will be available. Players should also bring their own lunch each day. There will be a break in order to eat, but food will not be provided at the tryout. I feel like I can copy and paste that. Camp? It's honestly, I was reading that. I was like, this sounds a lot like the golf camp I work at, only we normally don't provide water. We just tell parents, make sure that you send your kids with water. And half the time they don't listen, or they bring like those like little mini bottles of water. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Like the ones that have 8 ounces of water in it. It's like, it's 95 out. It's the middle of August. Do you want your child to die? We weren't joking. There is no water here. We don't even have water. It's what you bring. Like, what's going on here?
What, you mean on the golf course, there aren't just like random water fountains popping up on the fairway?
To see, the problem is, and this is a separate rant, but what the hell? I mean, you got like another 2 hours of driving to do, so we got time to...
2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, see, so we got plenty of time to roll. So...
We're in Connecticut. There's nothing interesting.
I want to refute that, but that state's a giant traffic jam. The fact you're moving as quickly as you are through it is surprising to me. But the problem is, a lot of these kids, their parents and subsequently them are members at country clubs. We're not doing these camps at country clubs. But at clubs, they normally have like water jugs spread out throughout the course, normally 2 or 3 per 9. So you'll have one at like, say, hole number 2, or one at hole number 5, and then one at round hole 7, and then repeat the same thing on the back. So that's normally the case. But the problem is, A, we don't go on the course until the afternoon, and B, where we are at, there is a snack shack you can buy stuff from, but if you don't send your kid with enough money to buy their lunch, or they're not bringing it, or we're not really, I don't want to say we don't monitor, we watch them so that way obviously they don't get lost, but like we're not hawking over them, making sure they buy what they're supposed to. We trust them to, buy the either Gatorade or water that would be intelligent to buy at 10 o'clock in the morning when it's already 85 out, instead of buying, a Kit Kat. So we're banking on that. And then normally there should be a water fountain available in the clubhouse. And I use clubhouses very loosely for where we do these camps at. But as I discovered last year, because I ran out of water with the giant jug, and I just came in from doing the afternoon, I was like 2:15, 2:30. So I was like, I leave in a half hour, but I'm real thirsty. I ran out of, so like I go inside to fill it up from the water fountain. I'm like, it's not working. Why isn't it working? And then one of the dudes that works in the restaurant, because it's like a restaurant clubhouse mix there, he comes out of the bank. He's like, oh man, that thing doesn't work. I was like, what do you mean it doesn't work? He's like, oh, it hasn't worked for years. And I was like, wait, so it hasn't worked for years and they haven't bothered getting it fixed. He's like, yeah, you got to go to the restaurant if you want to. So I was like, all right. And they wanted to charge me for water. I was like, screw that. I'm leaving work in a half hour. I can just deal with it. But I was thinking like, this is why we tell the parents, make sure you send your kid with enough water. And not that be a lesson to everyone listening. Send your kid with enough water. Like one 16-ounce bottle of water is not good enough for 6 hours in the heat. That just isn't going to work. A big jug where it's like, I don't know, 64 ounces now. Now we're talking. Now we're making headway on this.
And it keeps it cool.
Oh yeah, that too. You could dump a bunch of ice in there and keep it nice. Like we have, and the best part is too, we bring a cooler and the cooler is full of ice. So like you can throw the jugs and stuff into the cooler while we're doing like the different stations and whatnot. And when it's hot, like we're honestly not stupid. We cut the station short. Instead of going like 45 minutes, it's more like 35. So that way we can get them back underneath the tent and, hydrate and whatnot. There's ways you could do this. Just be intelligent, please. Like long and short is the people running the camps that are getting paid about $1.20 an hour before taxes. Do not want to have to keep buying your kids water because you plan poorly, and we don't want kids passing out from heat stroke. So please send your kids with enough water. There's my little rant.
That is a rant I'm sure people thought they would not get on this episode of the Indy Ball Report, but here we are. It's a damn good show, but sometimes we go on tangents.
But they're good tangents, so... See, now we're getting into the vintage. See, this is what we mean by Indy Ball After Dark. Once we get to Indy Ball After Dark, it gets a lot more fun, people. This is why you need to follow the Twitter at Indy Ball Pod during the season, especially because there's just a bunch of random Pioneer League tweets and a bunch of other stuff going on. And normally it's just me and like a handful of the usual suspects tagging each other. Hell, last year we just got into a whole big thread. I think it was like me, Ryan, Rob Pimsner. We were just going back and forth sharing Taylor Swift gifs. There's a lot of stupid stuff we do, and it's just entertaining to watch. So I'd highly recommend that. But you know what? I mentioned Rob and I mentioned Ryan, who's Indy Ball Nation now. But prior to that, he was focusing on the ALPB, the Atlantic League, and that's where our next story takes us to, the Long Island Ducks.
So smooth.
I know, silky. It's like a piece of Dove chocolate, just that smooth. And you know who likes chocolate? I assume the Long Island Ducks do, because Wally Backman's back and Lou Ford's back, and that's pretty sweet. But something that's a little sour is the fact that they have an old face that was with Staten Island last year. And if you're not following along on Twitter, then you probably don't know about it. But Nelson Figueroa goes back to the Ducks here. And we're going to discuss that one second. But let's just quickly knock out the two familiar faces that are probably never going to disappear. Wally Backman, year 4 for him. He's going to keep coming back because he's successful as a manager. Bit of a down year last year, but I mean, wasn't the most usual of suspects making the postseason. We'll say that. And Lou Ford's back, but he'll play until he drops dead. So that's not really surprising at all either. Year 13 for him. And he's closing in on like 5 different Duck records, and he's probably going to play in 1,100 games this. He'll reach his 1,100th game. And he'll probably come close to that many hits, too. I'd have to check to get the exact numbers. I'll go back to the press release while you comment on those two coming back, Will, and then we'll talk about Figueroa in 1 second.
At the end of the day, like, you also have to look at it from a business perspective for the Ducks. Wally Backman is a huge name that draws people. He's a big personality. I mean, again, like out east, Suffolk County, that is a heavy Mets area, and they know Wally Backman with the 86 Mets. So, and also Wally Backman, I'm not saying Wally Backman is just there because his name, because he's not at all. He's a very good manager. He had a down year last year, but you know what? If there's any organization in all of Indy Ball that has earned the right to get a pass after a down year, it is the Long Island Ducks. So
that meant Quebec.
That Quebec as well, yeah. But Quebec always like slips my mind, regardless though.
Yeah.
I mean, Backman's a really good manager. He would have to do something really not good to not or be really, really bad in order to not come back as Ducks manager. And so him being back, Lou Ford is just. I mean, he's timeless. They've run out of ways to really describe what Lou Ford does and how he does it. It's just incredible. And he's not going to play the full season. He's not going to play the field. But, you know, at the end of the day, he still is a somewhat productive hitter.
Oh, yeah.
Somehow. So I find that to be just appalling and amazing. And, I mean, Lou Ford will be with the Ducks as long as Lou Ford wants to be with the Ducks.
Yeah, like I even take it a step further and say Lou Ford is more than a somewhat productive. I call him productive because, I mean, like, let's just quickly look at his 2022. He only played 32 games, so, you know, slowing down a lot. But in 32 games, he had 21 runs scored, 34 hits, over a hit a game, 5 home runs, 5 doubles, 18 RBIs. He walked 5 times. He struck out 22, which admittedly isn't great. But still, his slash line was 270, 293, 429. So for a dude that's 45, that's pretty damn good. Like, that's a productive player. Good. Yeah, and I mean, the year prior in 21, he hit over 300 in nearly 60 games. So, I mean, like, he's still got it.
it's just a matter of how much from a legitimate baseball, like on the field perspective, how much value, because you'd assume he probably plays like 30, you could, I guess, pencil him in for 35 to 40 games without injury.
Yeah.
I think with a DH, it's another nice bat in the lineup. The Ducks will have plenty of good bats in their lineup. They always do. He represents the Ducks very, very well, and him coming back is certainly good to see, and a win for Indy Baller. I've never met someone who does not like Lou Ford, so it doesn't exist.
He's just such an anomaly. I mean, 54 total bases in 32 games. I mean, he adds, like, at the very least, he's a productive guy off the bench, and for at least a brief moment, he makes my hatred for the DH subside. But I mentioned a second ago I was going to get you the full notes on everything he's coming up close on. Here's the way for everything here. He's the franchise leader in hits all time with 1,002. He's one of 4 Atlantic Leaguers to reach 1,000 hits in the league. He is 94 hits away from tying former Ducks infielder Bryant Nelson as the all-time leader. So essentially, if he gets to 1,096 or 1,097, my mistake, 96 ties him, 97 puts him over the top, and at 97, you got to push for 1,100 to make it a clean number. He has totaled 497 RBIs, 527 runs, 218 doubles in a Ducks uniform, which leaves him 51 RBIs, 72 runs, and 27 doubles shy of Ray Navarrete for the Ducks all-time records there, and Ford's 842 games with the flock have left him 46 shy of equaling Dan Lyons' team record of 888. So would it be crazy to say he plays in 47, gets it, and then calls it?
Because I don't know if he's a type of guy though to kind of look at it in the sense of a milestone, like a number for him to hit and be like, all right, I'm done. I think he just loves playing baseball. Yeah,
that's true. I'm just wondering because now he's going to be going into his age 46 season. There's a lot of wear on those tires. Like obviously he loves playing ball, but I also kind of counter that with like, he's got to love to play ball, but he's still going to coach. So he kind of like levels off here. And I also kind of get the sense of like, you know, he's obviously like a company man because like he's played for, I mean, since 2010 for this organization. I mean, you spent 13 years for the team, you know, you obviously got some affinity there and the team loves him and the fans love him. So, I mean, you'd help the team out a lot if you were to be able to say, all right, we're going to go for these milestone records and we'll be able to have like special ceremonies and stuff and be able to kind of promote that. You'd really help the cause if you did that. And I could very well see him doing that. But what's crazy to me though is he's made 3 All-Star games. The most recent one was in 2018.
Animal.
I mean, really, he was 41 when he made that All-Star team. That's just crazy. This dude's the Tom Brady of baseball. I'm sorry. He just keeps going.
Right.
Oh, God.
Lou Ford outlasted Tom Brady. Suck it.
Yeah, really. And, obviously, we already said everything about Wally. He's been good. He's earned himself plenty of rope. They didn't fire him after the one set of allegations back in, 19? Then he wasn't getting fired. So, you know, he's going to be in for the long haul, barring something, like you said, significant there.
You would need a literal criminal conviction.
Yeah. Charges weren't good enough. We're going to need a conviction on him.
He was acquitted. Yeah. I mean, what else are you going to say?
Exactly. So, I mean, like, we can mention it, but, I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, he was acquitted. So, I mean, that's, you know, it was just an unfortunate sequence of events.
But you're in law school. You want to go into law school, Nick. He's innocent until proven guilty, and he was proven innocent. So, what are you going to say? Well, actually, not proven.
I was going to say, technically, no one's proven innocent. You're guilty or not guilty.
True.
But, yeah, and to be fair, I'm already in at 3 of the 10 law schools I applied to. I'm waitlisted at 3 and only rejected at 1, and I'm waiting on 3. So right now, we're 3-1-3, which honestly isn't that bad.
3-1-3. How many? So that's it's 9 points. Nice.
Yeah. So I'm not hating that. Well, I mean, to be fair, if I get the loser point, then I'm up to 12.
Yeah. True.
Now all I'm waiting on is Albany, Rutgers, and Roger Williams. So let's see how this plays out. But more important than any of that, because, you know, future careers aren't important. What is important is Nelson Figueroa spurns the upstart Ferry Hawks to go over to Long Island. Like, I obviously get it. Like, Staten Island has a new manager. The Ducks are known to bring their guys back. Nelson's one of their guys, really, because, I mean, he played with them in the past. If not for a long time, he still did. And still part of me is like, it feels like the Ducks took a chance to kind of stick it to the Ferry Hawks. Like, I'm not sure if I mentioned on the show some of the stuff that they supposedly had done before or not, but rumor is they like to kind of like poke them a little bit and kind of screw them a little bit. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, I get why you're doing this, but it seems like you'd be better off not, because if you build up your rival team and make them a really healthy, viable team early on and they establish, you'll be able to really play with that rivalry dynamic, and it could be, you know, a symbiotic relationship here. Because let's be real, how many people are the Long Island Ducks losing to the Staten Island Ferry Hawks? Like, if
it's funny. It literally the one that went from Long Island to Staten Island was cut from Long Island, so you can do the math.
Yeah. So, like, it's such an odd situation there, and it's just, I don't quite, like, grasp, you know, all of it. Like, obviously Nelson's good at his job. Like, I think that's fairly safe to say. I mean, even when we looked at the Ferry Hawks last year, their pitching was good. It's just they couldn't hit for shit. And then that was a major holdup for them. But ultimately, you know, I just kind of funny that it's like, okay, Hawk guy goes and becomes Duck dude. It's, you know, it's worthy of mentioning there. And I wonder if it was kind of like a deliberate thing or just one of those, it kind of happened things. Because I could very well see both happening.
I lean more along the lines of it kind of just happened. And at the end of the day, if the Ferry Hawks aren't taking the initiative to bring back Nelson Figueroa, why would the Ducks wait around? So I think that, and not to mention, there's also on a bigger scale, again, the Met market. Yeah. Nelson Figueroa is a former Met. He is a pretty well-known Met. And so I think it has more to do with that than it has to do with sticking it to the Ferry Hawks, because at the end of the day, there is no rivalry yet. The Ferry Hawks have not done anything and I'm not saying there won't be, but as of right now, it's just geographical or whatever, but like nothing has actually like happened yet. Like for like High Point and Gastonia have had some really good battles to establish that as a true rivalry. I mean, Staten Island's only been around 1 year, but I think that it hasn't. They haven't really challenged Long Island in that many senses to kind of make that a rivalry yet. So I don't think there would be any like that would be something I would expect, Nick, between like Long Island and Somerset.
Yeah. Okay.
They're not there. They're not there yet. Those teams are not at that level of dislike to each other yet. So I wouldn't think there would be anything like that there. I think it's more just along the lines of, hey, you're not bringing back a guy like Nelson Figueroa who had this team that really struggled, but his pitching was pretty good. He's also a former Met. He's also a big name. I would assume he has some sort of relationship with Backman. I don't know that for sure, but I mean, Backman's been around the Mets organization beforehand, so that's
my thinking too. That is somewhere in the minor leagues for the Mets.
I'd assume they have some sort of relationship. I think it just makes sense, and not to mention, out of everything, Nick, Nelson Figueroa probably wants to be the pitching coach for Long Island more than he wants to be the pitching coach for Staten Island. I think that's what it boils down to as well.
Very fair there. I mean, like, it definitely makes sense on that front there. It's just such a curious thing here, just because of some of the stuff I hear behind the scenes for it to be like that. And it's just, you know, I feel like Staten Island really should have been thinking, like, because last year it felt like they went too heavy on the Met side and not heavy enough on the Yankee side. And so now I just don't want to see them overcorrect and just kind of go heavy on the Yankee side and not so much on the Met side. I just hope that that's not what's happening here. And for all we know, it could have been Figueroa being like, I don't want to come back, so I'm out. It could have been Homer Bush saying, hey, I'm going to build my own staff. If you got an opportunity elsewhere, I suggest taking it because I can't guarantee you anything. It could be numerous factors. It could be all of the above. So I don't really know what to make of it. I just kind of want to throw it out there because it is an interesting thing to see. And it's very clear that, Staten Island especially wants that. And like I said, I hope it's not Long Island trying to get at and like hit Staten Island too hard too early. Because it just, they're not fighting for the same people, like the Staten Island people, I think, are largely people on Staten Island, obviously, and New Jerseyans. No one from New Jersey is driving out to Long Island regularly to go see a Ducks game.
I did it one time.
That's why I said regularly.
I did it, and it was a complete and utter disaster, and I'm never doing it again from New Jersey to Long Island, ever.
Because everyone makes that mistake. Because everyone makes that mistake once. Everybody does it once where they're like, oh, Long Island's not that bad. I can get out there. And they put it in the Google Maps and they're like, oh, look, it's only like an hour and a half. It's not bad. And then you find out that someone's Camry broke down the middle lane of one bridge and now it's backed up for 45 minutes. And then when you finally get past that, then you're like, oh shit, it's 5:30 and I'm driving through New York. And then all of a sudden you're not going anywhere quick. And you start the question right around about 5:15 when you're still nowhere near Long Island. Should I just try to turn around and go back to New Jersey? Because I doubt I'm going to make it there by the third inning. And then you decide, screw it, I'm just going to push on. If I don't get there in time, I'll find something else to do out there. And you wind up showing up and it's like 7:20 and you missed 1.5 innings and you're like, it wasn't that bad. And then you think, oh shit, I have to drive back now. So, obviously the Ducks are successful because they have all of Long Island there to work with, and Long Island's a great market to go with. And obviously they're a great organization too. But, with Staten Island, you don't have the same holdup. Now they'll have some similar issues, traffic and whatnot, but it's a lot easier to go to Staten Island than Long Island. So my main point is I just hope that they're not tearing each other down here. I don't want to see that yet. You can wait a little while until you start doing that. So
agreed. Yeah. We need some big time battles on the field before we get there that we just haven't really seen yet.
Exactly. So with that, we'll keep it moving here, and we will go to the next part of the Atlantic League news, which is earlier this week they announced for their 25th anniversary they're going to be doing a silver anniversary team. There will be 25 players named, 16 position players, 9 pitchers, of which there will be 6 starting pitchers and 3 relievers. All will include at least one player that was active in each year of the league. So from 98 through 2023, these players will all be active. Now, of course, that means when they add Lou Ford to this team, he will count for 13 of those seasons. So, it will be okay in that regard. But yeah, so you'll have that there. The list originally had 162 names on it of all-stars, champions, and record holders. They cut it down to 25, as mentioned. They're going to be revealed over the next 12 weeks, one at a time. I take that to mean they're going to reveal 2 a week leading up to training camp. They may have, or leading up to opening day, rather. They may have to go ahead and, add a few in a week or knock a few down a week just to make the math works. But if you do 12 weeks, it's 3 months. 3 months from now is May, because you have February, March, and April going all the way through it. So they'll have to work it out, but opening day is end of April anyway. So you can line it up. So I figured that's the way it's going to go. And earlier in the week, after they announced it, probably the next day, I think it was like Wednesday, they announced the player that was going to be added. The first player to the silver team was announced. It is Mark Guifoyle. He has been named to the team. He was a lefty reliever for the Bridgeport Bluefish from 1998 to 2003. He won the championship in Bridgeport in 99, and he is third all-time in saves at 122, the most by a left-handed reliever. He appeared in 296 games with a 22-19 record, a 3.07 ERA, 318 strikeouts, 325 and a third innings pitched, 3-time All-Star and 1-time postseason All-Star. That is who gets in as that first reliever spot. So overall thoughts on doing the team, and I guess do you have any thoughts on Mike Guifoyle being named to the team as well? I guess that'd be good. He seems deserving. That's all I really have to say. I don't remember him pitching, so I can't really comment on the level of play.
Yeah, I can't really comment on the 98 to 2003. I mean, he seems deserving and has some good accolades. I will say, though, and I know this is going to sound shocking for a lot of people and loyal listeners to this podcast, but I am going to enthusiastically praise the Atlantic League. Are we ready for this? This is awesome.
I have to put the clapping effects in now.
Yes, you have to put the clapping effects in, do whatever you got to do, because this is awesome. This is a great idea, and this is something I've been waiting for them for so many years. What the Atlantic League, when they win the record book for 3 years, like, this is the type of history that the Atlantic League has, a rich history with some great names and great performances and teams that were great, and you just don't know about them. And teams don't know about them, and especially as the league is starting to change. And, you know, of course, there's nothing you can do about that, and that's not a good or bad thing, but it's good to honor the history, and it goes a lot beyond of what the Atlantic League had done in the past, which is basically a lot of their strategy is every time Patrick Mahomes does anything as the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, it is Patrick Mahomes just did this. Did you know his dad played for the Blue Crabs? Yes, you've told me every single time that Patrick Mahomes has done anything. Also, Pat Mahomes was not barely was in the Atlantic League.
Did you know Pat Mahomes Sr. played for the Ducks as well as Rich Hill and Scott Kazmir played for the Skeeters, and Ricky Henderson was in this league too?
Yeah, great, but I also I want to know more about the players. How much does the Atlantic League talk about Bryant Nelson? How much do they talk about Jeff Nettles? How much do they talk about Josh Presley? They don't, right? And I know that those names aren't what makes aren't what drives engagement or whatever. And anytime, and I don't blame them for saying anytime Rich Hill does something Rich Hill pitched a pitch for the Ducks or whatever, and he's still pitching in the freaking major leagues at age 42 or whatever he is now, which is amazing. But I also think that there is a place that, I'm so happy that the Atlantic League is finally doing something like this, is to honor those players who, maybe they didn't get back to the affiliated ball or the major leagues for whatever reason, based on age or whatever, but made a huge impact on the league and on the franchises that they touched on, and you just don't hear. And you just don't hear the league or anybody talk about how many Atlantic League fans currently know the name Glenn Murray? There are not many. Not many do. Guarantee you know that Scott Kazmir pitched for the Skeeters, and I guarantee you know that Roger Clemens made 2 starts for the Sugarland Skeeters and whatnot.
And Trace McGarry too.
Yeah, but what about a guy like
Lincoln Mickelson?
Glenn Murray, Murray was for Nashua for the Pride and was hitting 35 home runs a season. And you're right. He didn't get back to the major leagues. He's not the big story, but those are the guys that leagues need to do that specifically the Atlantic League needs to do a better job of honoring. And I think for the 25th anniversary, sorry for the very long-winded and passionate rant here, but I think that this exactly the kind of stuff they need to do to honor their history, and honor their history more so than just taking guys that are already famous and just saying, hey, this famous guy played in the Atlantic League. Start talking about people who actually made a big players and managers or whoever who made a big footprint on your league, and that's something they have to do a better job of, and I'm hoping that this is the start of that, and I'm very excited about this idea and to see that this team continue to be rolled out.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I'm not even asking for you to promote guys like a Jimmy Hurst, for example, who did fantastic for a very long time. I'm not asking for even some of the more contemporary guys that are killing it. Darryl Thompson would be a great example of a guy you could promote. And quite frankly, I'm looking forward to the next 25 years of, did you know Brandon Phillips played in this league? I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. That big time. But, I'm not even asking for those guys. I'm not asking for Jim Fuller or Victor Capion to get mentioned, even though that would be nice. I'm not asking for any of that. But we could even promote just the Canseco brothers, the fact that they were both here, and you never hear about that. You don't hear about Armando Benitez being here. These are still big name guys. These are recognizable names. I mean, who doesn't know Jose Canseco? I can maybe see not remembering Ozzie Canseco, but certainly Jose, you remember. And obviously, he's got his own issues, and I could get why you don't want to promote him as much as other guys. But there's a lot of other guys that could be promoted, and that's something that we've been saying, like you mentioned, for years now. Of they don't get acknowledged. They need to be acknowledged. These guys deserve to be acknowledged. And I agree with you. I really love the silver anniversary team idea, doing it slowly in the ramp up to the start of the season, so everybody gets their moment in the sun, gets their chance to breathe. What I even love to see even more is if there was an all-star game, we could go ahead and pull all 25 of them out there for the all-star game and have them out and do a thing. That would be nice. Yeah. But, if we were able to do that, even because obviously they're going to be spread out across the country. Some guys are going to be, in Fairfield, Connecticut, like Guilfoyle is, and others are probably going to be in like Birmingham, Alabama, and some will be in the wilderness of Montana. So it'll be hard to get them together. But if you could go ahead and like host a couple of Heritage Date games a year, or not even a year, just this year, have one or two Heritage games. And I get it, like the Ducks are really like the last, they're not even an OG team, but like as far as teams that exist in the 90s, they're them. And then it's like Lancaster and Southern Maryland and York are the next three oldest, which are kind of trippy to me because I always view them in like that kind of second wave.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it just is really weird to me because I'm just like, for me, when you say Atlantic League, the teams I immediately think of are Nashua, Newark, Somerset, Long Island, Atlantic City, and Bridgeport. Like those are the ones that I immediately like, oh yeah.
Or even Camden.
Camden too, yeah. Like Camden too. Like those are just the ones that come to my mind. I don't really like, obviously I know Lancaster, I know York's there, Sugarland, had an imprint there, but I certainly don't think like Charleston and High Point and Gastonia and Lexington. Like those are just not like, they're Atlantic League teams, but they're not like, for lack of a better term, they're not my Atlantic League teams. They're the new ones. And I'm happy they're here, obviously. If they weren't here, we'd have a major problem. But, I still don't think about that. So for me, I obviously understand you probably can't, like in some cases you physically can't. Like you physically cannot play a game in Camden or Bridgeport or Newark anymore. The stadiums just aren't there. But I understand it'd be very difficult to work something out with Sugarland or Somerset. I get it. So it's not a practical thing, but it would be nice if we could go ahead and have some sort of date where we could get all 25 guys there and do something proper to, give them a send-off or whatnot, because these guys were critical to building the league. So I will agree with you, and I don't want to make this section sound a little too ranty, because it does sound a little ranty, but like I think we both really want to hammer on the point of this is fantastic, and I'd love to see more of it. And I love, too, that after they posted, like, all right, Mike's part of the team, he's the first one there, that they then followed it up and posted a video or like a short clip of what looks like a Zoom call between Rick White and Guilfoyle. I really like seeing that, because you get to hear them talking, you get to hear the reaction to it. And like for some of them, I'm sure it's just like, yeah, I played professional baseball at one point and they moved on. It's not that much to them anymore. But for other guys, I mean, like, if you played like 6, 7, 8 years in the Atlantic League, that's a not insignificant amount of time of your life that you spent there. There's probably a lot of meaningful life events that happened to you personally during that time. And in some cases, what happened there probably had a large impact on your life going forward. So it is something special, and to be honored by that, it's special to the individual, and it's also special to a lot of the fan bases too. And one of the concerns I had before they started announcing names was, is it just going to be the names we know? Are they just going to be playing the hits, and they're going to throw a couple of token guys in here that everyone kind of loves, and that, are Atlantic League guys, but they're not really publicized. There'll be like 3 or 4 of them, and then the other 20 spots are going to be, your brand names that really shouldn't be there. And it doesn't look like they're going to do that. It looks like they're actually going to go with, these guys are responsible for the league's success, and that they're actually going to put a priority on performance in the league and longevity, which were the two things I really, really, really wanted to see. Those are what I wanted above all else. But when you have a guy that spent 6 years in the league or 5 years in the league as your first guy, that tells me, okay, longevity matters, holding records matters, being up there on the stat list matters. And that's what gets me really excited for this, that we're not just going to get your token names like we were saying in the beginning, like your Rich Hills that pitched one game here. We're actually going to get meaningful guys that spent time here, that spent, careers here. And, I hope that, if there's any feuds with any of the people here, that didn't affect the list and that we're actually getting the 25 most important people in the Atlantic League's history, because I really like seeing this. I agree with you. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah. I think it's important, and it gets those fans excited too. I mean, especially the ones that remember titles or whatever, and that maybe if those players won championships and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm glad the league's doing it.
Absolutely, there. And on that note, we'll move on to a quick stop in a league that I think most of us have forgotten existed. And we did an interview about 2 years ago with the CEO of this league, so you can go back. I think it's episode 98. If you want to listen to the interview with the CEO of the Maverick League, and we have news from that league. We have not really covered them since because, quite frankly, and I hate to be cruel to the league that we had a CEO from on the show, but if we're cruel to the Atlantic League occasionally, I feel like these guys are fair game as well. They're a largely irrelevant league, and normally when we have mentioned in the past, it's more or less, have they admitted defeat and joined the Pioneer League yet, or are they still going to do this kind of circuit sideshow thing that they've been doing that probably is cheaper than joining the Pioneer League, and the reason why they're doing it? But yeah, so they added a staff member. They added Kim McKay. And so the only reason I'm mentioning this is because when I did my usual search through of every team and every league website, I do before all that, I look up independent baseball, and then I go to the news tab on Google to see if there's anything major that I may have missed and didn't see, or something like, oh, look at teams building a new ballpark, which apparently there may be a team in North Carolina. There's something there. I got to look into that, but that's not important. What came up was the Maverick League hires well-known person, something like that. You'll see the link in the show notes. Go there. And so I looked up Kim McKay, and it appears that she's well-known in the world of watercraft racing. So naturally, I was like, oh, it must be like speedboats. And so I did a little bit more digging because in the article it says she's going to head up the business inquiries. I don't know if that means she's going to be in charge of sponsorships and professional partnerships and stuff like that, or if it just means if you want to sponsor something like an inning or put an ad up on the wall, you call her and she handles it. I don't really know exactly what, just as she'll head up business inquiries. So make of that what you will. So I looked it up because apparently there's oh, she's qualified for this. So I was like, okay, let me look to see what the deal is. And I discovered A, watercraft racing is jet ski racing, which honestly sounds pretty cool. And B, I couldn't find any credential for this, as in, I don't know what makes her qualified to handle this or not. So good on Kim McKay for getting a job in the Maverick League. It'll be interesting to see how this works. And to the Maverick League, I assume she's big in the greater Salem, Oregon region, and that this is part of the reason why she's being brought in. And I hope you know what you're doing, and I hope I missed something that was very important, because I frankly don't know why she was hired, A, and B, why she's heading up business inquiries, which seems to be an extremely important thing. But yeah, I don't know what more I have to say on this, Will. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on it, but I'm very curious to hear them.
Yeah, it's intriguing, I guess. It's the Maverick League, which I frankly didn't know was still playing.
They have a TV deal now too.
Was a TV deal?
Yeah, they have a TV deal. Give me 1 second, I'll pull it up. I still have their homepage, which is it doesn't actually have a logo. It's a Wikipedia thing, and then it takes a second to load, and then it's a dark thing. But yeah, if you go to news, it actually lists out every news thing. It says Mavericks League signs TV deal. That's a typo. They should remove the S unless no, it actually is Mavericks League. That's plural, not possessive. Mavericks Independent Baseball signs broadcast deal with Maybach's Global Entertainment LLC to jump on board with Comfy TV and iHolyfield TV networks. They play 96 games.
I don't know what that means.
Games will be airing every weekend on local TV stations across America, including major media markets such as Boston, New York City, Los Angeles, Fresno, and other outlying communities in Middle America and rural communities throughout the country. Okay, I'm just going to say, can we take a minute to say that's very insulting to Boston, LA, and New York to put Fresno in that same conversation? Like, if you're going to pick a California city,
Fresno.
like you could have said San Francisco, you could have said Los Angeles, hell, you could have even said San Diego, which I still would have scoffed at, but I would have been like, okay, you know, they're somewhat major, I'll give them that. But Fresno? Okay. Holyfield broadcasts will carry games in metro urban centric, Detroit, Miami, throughout Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, I don't think it's an actual TV thing. I think it's just a streaming thing. You could go to the Maverick League's website, which is mavericksindependentleague.com. If you want to look up more, just go to the news and it's the first thing under it. It's old though. This has been a thing for a while. We may have even covered it. I honestly forgot about it, but yeah, they do have a TV deal.
Huh. Well, guess you learn something new every day, and
yeah.
Go Mavericks League.
Yeah. I hope you guys know what you're doing. Like, I'm not cheering for anyone to downfall, but I'm sorry. There's a lot of meat on this bone. And, I guess we'll move on to the American Association so we can wrap up the news thing an hour into the show, because it's going to be a little bit of a show this week. Like, we actually had news to discuss, and we still do have the review to do, which, you know, I'm cool doing it and keep going with it. Like, it may take a minute to edit, but, you know, we're due for a long show in the off season. But I will end with the Maverick League by just saying one thing. Jet ski racing does sound pretty cool, doesn't it?
I can't say that I would try it.
Yeah.
But I am intrigued by it. I think it does sound fun for people who know how to do it.
Yeah, like I just think it'd be kind of cool to watch. You know, like, just imagine you're chilling on the beach watching some dude just churn jet skis. You know, like, that's pretty sick.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it sounds fun, and I guess it's somehow connected to independent league baseball now.
Yeah, like I said, the only thing I could find on Kim McKay is that she's one of the best professional watercraft racers, and at one point being top 5 in the world, I believe, ranking number 4 at highest, and she's a big baseball fan. And I pray to God that that's not the qualification they're talking about. When I say I hope I missed something, I genuinely mean I hope I overlooked something. I hope I didn't Google it right, and that there is some sort of other qualification, and that she built up some sort of like jet ski racing empire, or was important in some sort of business development, and then that's why she's heading this. And it's not just like, oh, cool, person I like and the thing I like is available, let me bring them on. Like, I really hope it's not that, because like I said, I want them to do well. It's just, you forget about them a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, like, already it's hard to cover the Pioneer League because they start every game at like 9-10 o'clock Eastern. So it's not great. But the Maverick League's way out there, and they're firmly in like 10 o'clock start time. And I gotta be honest, I'm not trying to find those games. There's too much else in the core 4 going on. So yeah, but, American Association time, because we do have 2 important things to talk about over there. And the first of those things is Steve Schuster. He's no longer with the Winnipeg Gold Eyes because he's taken a job with the New York Mets organization, namely in AA Binghamton, as a data analyst. The Levittown, New York native became a analytics wizard in recent years, and anyone that doesn't follow him on Twitter did themselves a great disservice by not doing so. That man had all sorts of advanced numbers and would break stuff down, and like, he had Northern League records and Northern League analytics at one point, and I was stunned.
Yeah.
He's a pretty nice dude too. I've talked to him back and forth. We had one disagreement once when I was like, being in Canada with the pandemic thing kind of helps you out a bit, because every time you play a home game, you know, visiting teams have to basically have a COVID squad, and that's going to help you. Not to say there aren't disadvantages there, but that's going to help you for the home games. And we had a disagreement on that. But outside of that, really nice guy. And frankly, I don't really have any issues with him. Was always helpful to us, one of the better media guys. He was broadcaster of the year last year. And overall, he's going to be missed in independent ball. Like, as far as off the field, like not directly involved with the field staff and the play, he's one of the most important guys in that operation there. I mean, you can't blame a guy for taking an opportunity to be closer to home and, to move up and do something which, quite frankly, it looks like he's more interested in. He's more interested in being on the data and analytics side than broadcasting. And if that's what he wants to do, like, all the power to him. And I wish him nothing but the best with the Mets organization, especially when you get to work for the team that you grew up cheering for. That's, it's a great opportunity. You can't blame anyone for taking it. So, but still, he'll be missed there. And I thought it was worthy of mention.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve is one of the best, because my best memory of Steve is I think we got into like an hour or two back and forth on Twitter about how he calculated Atlantic League WAR, because he got this whole spreadsheet of Atlantic League Atlantic League WAR, and I was trying to figure out how to calculate it, and he was showing me, and yeah, he's one of the best. And I think in a lot of ways, when he is a pioneer, I think, in independent league baseball, not just the American Association, of just, pushing that kind of the data and analytics that you're starting to see a lot of these leagues and teams kind of use and push as trying to be attractive to potential players and teams, and pushing the partnerships they have with certain software companies and whatnot. So I think that Steve was really a pioneer, because there were not many people who were talking about analytics and independent league baseball when Steve was doing it. So congratulations to him. I mean, he's a terrific broadcaster. Certainly will be missed in the world of Indy Ball, but I'm sure the Mets definitely know what they're doing bringing him on, and I'm sure he's going to do great there. So a great guy, and super happy for him. It's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, the dude knows what he's doing. He's one of the first for the analytics, like you mentioned. The only other real analytic push I remember seeing that was kind of out there and kind of open was with the Y'alls. The Y'alls were big into that as well. They had a whole nerd squad, and most of them got poached after the 22 season. And Lexington did it for a little bit. I think that was more Mike Coltax doing than anything else. So, some of the teams have it, and I think Steve's a large portion of, that being more of a focal point, certainly there. And, I think he's done more than enough to warrant, at least the serious discussion, if not a guaranteed spot in the American Association Hall of Fame. I think he has done a lot there, whether it's with previous organizations prior to Winnipeg or just his time in Winnipeg. He's done an awful lot there, and I think he warrants a serious discussion on that front. And it may sound like hyperbole, but realistically, when you look at a lot of what he did, just even from a promotional of the league standpoint, by just putting the numbers out there and going, here's all the spin numbers, here's all of this, here's that, it appeals to a certain really nerdy and geeky kind of population. And I'd be willing to venture to say,
me.
Yeah,
that's me.
Yeah, like I said, I'm willing to venture to say the people that are following along on Twitter, we're gonna eat that stuff up. Even if we don't love analytics, it's still this is very interesting. I don't ever see it on this platform, and so it's certainly great. So. Yeah, best of luck to him. I really do wish him the best. With that said, we have one last bit of news before we have a review to get into, and that is in Sioux Falls. They are eyeing a parcel of land in downtown Sioux Falls, nearly the middle of it. It's currently on the edge of what's considered downtown, but it's going to eventually become the heart with the way the city is growing and expanding. At least that's what it sounds like from the town council. The long and short of it is, it's essentially failed commercial / industrial land. There's some parks over by it, but it's about a 10-acre plot of land that currently the local government wants to put something on there to renew it, and they're citing a lot of community input. They're citing an awful lot of, council input. They're looking to see what's going to go here, and it seems like they want to bring about that part of town. And like we said, when you listen to the count and you read through the articles, by and large, they seem to be on the same page of, we need to expand downtown because it's currently being outgrown. In addition to it being outgrown, we need to go some way. We already went north. We already went, east. We're looking west now, and we're looking south sooner than later. So they're kind of like, what should we do? And one of the mock-ups is, well, we could go with stadiums for this. And the Canaries and a local soccer team want the stadium. Obviously, the Canaries are far more on the side of, how about we have a baseball-centric one, and then we can move out of our 82-year-old stadium into this brand new one. And obviously the Birdcage was renovated about 23 years ago, turn of the millennium, that got a refresh on, then with new ownership in there. They've been putting a little bit of work in there too, so I don't want to make it sound ancient, but it's closer to the end of its lifespan than it is the beginning of its lifespan. I think that's also a fair thing to say. So with that as kind of like your template, that as your basis, it's not surprising that the team itself has done a large PR push on it. And obviously they're in the very beginning stage. They just got the parcel of land, and it's kind of at an intersection. It's not far from a highway. It seems to be a pretty good spot. I imagine a lot of redevelopment is going to go into it. I imagine it's going to be a long time coming because you have to get all sorts of approvals, and you got to have a bunch of different plans. And if you got to move roadways and you got to handle all that, and nothing's even saying it's going to be a stadium. I mean, for all we know, you could just slap some mixed use housing there where you have like shops and whatnot on the bottom and then actual housing on top of it. That's a possibility. It could be that and the stadium. It could be a lot of different things. If you go to the particular plot of land, it's, I believe, like 10th and Cliff is where it is, if you're familiar with the area. If you're not familiar, show notes. I believe it's the bottom link from the Sioux Falls Business Journal. That's the one, not from the team itself, although both links are there. If you go there, it shows you whereabouts it is. And if you notice when you look on a map, there's a McDonald's that kind of juts into the middle of the property, which I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see something worked out where either that property is just acquired by the city, or it's kind of like a trade-off deal where it's like, okay, we'll give you a different plot of land, but we want this little bit because we really don't want this McDonald's here because it's kind of messing with the vibe of what we're going for.
Yeah.
So, like, I could see a lot of things here, but really the important thing, and the reason why we bring it up, is Sioux Falls, the Canaries themselves, really are pushing hard, it seems like, in the very early stages to try and build up a lot of support among people that follow the team, among locals, to getting a new stadium built. And when you have a stadium that is 82 years old, it's, you know, you don't want to have to put a bunch of work in, even though you've already started putting some work in there. You know, it's a lot easier to try and get the local government to build you a stadium and then you become an anchor tenant than it is for you to keep putting your own money into a decrepit and really old stadium. And I have some other ideas and reasons why you'd want that as Sioux Falls, especially as new ownership in True North, that being the company that owns it. I have some ideas as to why they would want it. But before I go off on that, I'm going to let you talk because I've talked way too long.
I think the only thing I would add is just the fact that, one, this is the start of a really long process, even if the Canaries end up getting what they want. Now, it makes a lot of sense because, as you mentioned, Nick, the Birdcage, they need a new stadium. And the Birdcage, look, we all love the Birdcage. It has a fun name. I mean, who doesn't love the Birdcage? But yeah, it's incredibly old, and it definitely needs a facelift. The Canaries need a new stadium, and we've seen this kind of thing before with like soccer stadiums and baseball stadiums and trying to combine the two in some way. So I think it's important to remember after all this, it's such a long process. It's such a long way away, but on the surface, I would say that it makes a lot of sense, and that it certainly fits a need for what the Canaries need, and with the locals. And you're trying to, and you're right in the sense that you're trying to drum up support, because if you don't have the support of the taxpayers, it is really hard to get a independent league stadium, a minor league, or not even just Indy Ball, minor league stadium built in a particular town, period. So that's certainly important as well. But I think it's a little too early, I think, in the process here to really draw any major conclusions. But I do think at least there is an avenue there for the Canaries to have a new stadium built. Whether it actually happens, I don't know, but at least like there's an avenue. You sort of see like the vision a little bit, but still definitely a long way to go in that process.
Yeah, I'd agree with that entirely. But the other part of it that I want to bring up is it could be also like a St. Paul situation where they got their brand new ballpark in, what was it, 2015-ish? And immediately what kind of became like the thing going around? Like, oh, well, look at this ballpark. Look at the way this team's ran. They would be a great affiliated minor league team. And then what happened 5 years later? They became an affiliated minor league team. And so if you put in a brand new ballpark, let's just say for the sake of argument, this thing, you sort out what you want to do with the property. It takes 2 years to build it, and everything all said and done, it gets built around 2020, anywhere from 2026 to 2028. Let's go 2028 on the long term on it. I don't know. I don't exactly recall how long each partnership agreement was between the teams and major league clubs. For whatever reason, 10 years is what was in my head. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, even I'm wrong, and it's say 15 years. Okay. So 15 years signed in 2020 is bringing you to the end of the 2035 season. That means 7 more years, which allows you from pretty much now, when the Canaries got taken over in 22, that gives you basically 13 years to really kind of build your act together, figure out your ballpark for 7 years. In this brand new one, it would be 7 years of getting the ballpark together, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, all this kind of jazz. Partnership window opens again. And now if you're the Twins, you say, well, we'll keep St. Paul as the AAA affiliate. And if we could go ahead and put our AA affiliate in South Dakota right there, why, hell, that's a pretty tempting offer, ain't it? And being that they're currently in one of our partner leagues, and we basically can look at whatever we want, and we could really get into the nitty gritty on this, and we've been able to kind of officially talk about this for a couple years leading up to it. And at that point, too, you figure add an extra 7 years, city's able to kind of build up and redevelop the area around it so that we have kind of the outskirts of the brand new downtown. You're starting to become more of the heart of the brand new downtown. It just is a very tempting thing if you're the Minnesota Twins or even, say, a Detroit Lions, or not Detroit, Detroit Tigers. If you're a Detroit Tigers or Minnesota Twins, something like that, it's very tempting. Even a Chicago-based team, you're not terribly far with the Sioux Falls right there. You're in a pretty good location for a lot of Major League clubs. And let's not forget that Major League Baseball is, I wouldn't necessarily say actively, but they're certainly not going to be turning down any expansion teams. Would any of us be surprised there's an extra 2 new Major League Baseball teams in 2035? That means we're going to need new minor league affiliates. And if none of the teams that got cut last time around did any major work in regards to getting a new stadium done, but you have a Sioux Falls team that has a brand new stadium, maybe some other new stadiums popping up across the country, why, hell, there's a lot of really tempting options out there, isn't there? Especially if you have a team in more of a Midwest region, like, say, a Nashville and, say, Charlotte. Why, if you're Charlotte, that's not terribly far from High Point or Gastonia now, is it? And if you put a team in Nashville, you could grab a couple of affiliates in either Tennessee or the surrounding states, and those teams that have that currently own those affiliates are going to need to find a new team to make a deal with. And Sioux Falls, we have a brand new ballpark. It's very tempting. So that's all a very long way of saying, if you have a brand new ballpark that gets done a couple years before, that partnership window opens again, or that affiliated window opens again, you can go into market and be, the prime pig. So, I wouldn't be shocked if that's part of the reason that they're pushing for it, especially when it's a brand new ownership group that doesn't really have any real affinity for independent ball or the American Association themselves, even if there's nothing that either grouping could do, It's just, at the end of the day, if you're looking at it from a pure numbers perspective, affiliated is almost certainly better because your 2 major expenses are covered and all it's going to cost you is like a cut of your revenue. But there's a lot of just public perception and public marketing that works better on an affiliate level, and we can't be, blind to that. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's part of it. I'm not going to say that's entirely it. Brand new ballpark, when you have one that's, old enough to be most people's grandfather, is, there's something to it, especially when it doesn't have the same kind of history and clout as a lot of these other ones do. But, I wouldn't be shocked about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked about it either. And I think you bring up a good point in particular about the ownership group, where at the end of the day, that ownership group does not have any loyalty to the American Association or Independent League Baseball. So what they care about is one, of course, the team, and two, the surrounding community of Sioux Falls. And you're right, that would become a very attractive market. And say if you want to keep with the whole Minnesota idea, as far as Double A is concerned, it makes it a little difficult as far as the leagues are concerned, because I believe Wichita is their current one, and that's in the Southern League or the Texas League or something like that. So it might be more of a Midwest League affiliate fit. So that's the only part of it that I guess you'd have to consider is where would that realistically fit. However, I don't think there's any doubt if that opportunity were to present itself, I think that would be one of the more attractive options that Sioux Falls, that the city could do with that land. So I think developing story, but I think the affiliated intrigue and allure is not something that should be discounted at all.
Yeah, it's something that I think really is worth looking at, because when you start really looking at okay, where would a team go? And then you start looking around, there's a lot of brand new ballparks that make sense. And I could see that being one of them. And you mentioned the league fit. The only thing I would say to counter that necessarily would be, obviously, major league clubs don't really have, and I may be a bit harsh on it, but I'll just kind of state it bluntly, they don't really have any respect for minor league baseball. They see them as an ends to a mean, and if they can go ahead and get by, great. But if, they have to go ahead and let them die, then that's just the way business has to be done. There's casualties in war, is the way they kind of view it. And so, if they have to just completely restructure the minor leagues again and just kind of tell them, hey, figure it out. I don't really care if you just lost your rival. I don't really care if you just added travel on there. Just figure it out. We want the brand new ballpark. We want the amenities. Make it work. If that was the decision, I again would not be surprised. I mean, what have we seen over the last 5 years from Major League Baseball to make them, to make us believe that they would operate in any other way?
Yeah, zero.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly how they'll act.
Their complete operating directive has been, screw you, I got mine. And I'm going to continue to get mine. So let's be real too at the end of the day. If the only thing that was holding up was an increased travel budget, and let's just say that travel budget's an extra, I don't know, 20, 30 grand a year. If it meant the difference between getting their way and not, they can write a check for an extra 20, 30 grand and they'll screw something else down the line. For 30 grand to get the brand new ballpark with the better setup and an opportunity to really benefit themselves in the future, especially if you have a group that's, you trust a lot in the baseball operations department and they come to you and go, this would be a good environment for developing our players, i.e. developing star players that we can market and then make some money off of, and we can win with these guys, which will make us even more money. If you get the right guy to pitch it for 30 grand, that's a business expense, dude. That's all that isn't nothing. So, obviously I don't know the exact numbers, but like I said, I think that if just figure out the baseball part of it's the holdup, that's not a holdup at all. I think it's more or less, is that something Sioux Falls wants? And I don't know if the answer is yes or no, but I mean, it's anyone's guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the travel budget ultimately would not really hold them back. Yeah. But it's going to be really interesting to watch, and if affiliated or maybe, the American Association is still certainly on the table there as well. Just building a new ballpark and keeping everything else the same still on the table. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Absolutely
there. And so with that, we do still have the Frontier League's Eastern Division review. I assume you still got an hour of driving.
Hour and 17 minutes. Hey, if you want, we can make it 2 episodes.
All right.
That's out there. Or a marathon episode. They're all good options.
I mean, really, like, here's what I'm thinking. I think we just go ahead and re-record it now, and then we figure it out later on if we want to cut it or if we want to, just make it one giant thing. If you got the time, I mean, we might as well just keep going, right?
I mean, hey, I'm just driving, so hour and 17 minutes. I think that's plenty of time for a division recap.
Yeah, I think we can get it done. And Frontier League is
on a roll.
Yeah, let's let it run. So pretty much the same deal as the last time around, where we're gonna go over the East Division of the Frontier League, like we went over the West Division of the Frontier League. I went back and I listened again to the previews on all of them. We have all 8 teams here. We're going to go in the order which recorded. It's episode 166. If you want to go back and listen to that, timestamps are in the description of that one if you want to cut to a particular team. As far as here, I'm going to make you scroll to find it, but it will be in the same order. So it's going to go Sussex County, then Empire State, then New Jersey, then New York, then Ottawa, then Quebec, then Three Rivers, and then Tri-City. Then we're going to go back over our predictions and then go ahead and give our 3 or 4 burning questions at the end. That's how we operate around here. And so with that, I think we could probably just dive on in on this. So, going into 2022, Sussex County, first one up, they went 49-46 in 2021. In 2022, they were 54-41. So an improvement, still missed the postseason in 21, and they would wind up missing in 22, of course. But one thing that we had expected coming into the season was that they'd be a very good batting team, but their arm depth would be very questionable. We didn't see all too many. And of course, we recorded this like a couple days into the season when it came out, because a lot of these leagues like to all go at the same time. Frontier, Pioneer, and American Association are really all within a week of each other. So getting 3 reviews or previews, I guess in that case, out in that kind of a time period is kind of tough. So this was done a couple of things in. We mentioned Michael Mediavilla, but he was so-so at that point. And overall, the general consensus we had about Sussex County was that they were a fringe playoff team, but they were weaker on paper. Now, in the end, Sussex County would miss the postseason, but they'd only miss by about 2 games. So I'd say we were right that they were a fringe playoff team. But when you look at the team stats, how right were we? That's a great question. But before we answer that question, immediate thoughts, Will.
Yeah, I think as far as Sussex County, there was definitely, it's interesting, Nick, and I think you'd probably agree with this, that at least from when you compare the rosters on paper of the 2021 and the 2022 team for Sussex, and obviously the 22 Sussex team had a lot better record. Neither made the playoffs, but the 22 team had a lot better record by about, I believe, like 5 games,
yeah.
if I'm doing the math correctly.
Yep,
but I think that the 21 team on paper was significantly more talented.
Oh yeah,
and it just did not come to fruition. Not the Sussex County definitely made some improvements last year, but I think for me with them, it honestly just came down to consistency. And I know that's kind of a cliche term that people kind of say when there's nothing else to say, like, oh, you just got to be consistent. At times, Sussex you would see the absolute best of Sussex where you're like, wow, this is a surefire playoff team. And then they'll drop 8 in a row.
Yeah.
And that was just the problem in a division where it was very difficult. It was a tough division with a lot of really good teams, and I think it honestly was their undoing in the end, because the consistency just wasn't really there, even though they did make a lot of improvements, even though I'd argue their roster on paper, and again, that's why baseball is a fun sport, because it's not played on paper, and sometimes the teams that look good on paper don't perform at all. I just think the consistency, and like they would show flashes, and then they would just drop. They would go into the stretches where they drop where they drop like 9 of 11 games or something along those lines, and they would kind of put themselves in a bad position, and ultimately where they missed the playoffs by a couple of games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I mean, that was kind of the story towards the end of the season. They were keeping it competitive. And you could go back to a lot of those episodes, go back to like the episodes in the 170s and 180s, and everything we'd always say about them was like, they're right there, they're right in contention. And then at a certain point, they just kind of fell off the cliff and they took themselves out of the hunt. And it'd be one thing if you were slumping, but other people were slumping with you, or nobody was really taking that grasp and running with it. The problem was Tri-City finished with the same exact record as they did. They finished with the same 5-game record too, and they were kind of neck and neck there. And the other issue was Ottawa got really hot. They finished 9-1 in their last 10. They had a big winning streak prior to that. Quebec was always getting that one, and we're going to talk a lot about Quebec in a little bit. But the issue that then became was the Boulders won 12 in a row to finish the year. Like, there's a lot of credit there. And again, we're going to talk about all these teams later on, but like, when you have teams that got really hot at the end and then you started slumping and you had to bring her back to 500 baseball to finish off the year, that's just not going to work. And I mean, in the case of like Tri-City, again, they were like a second half team, slow start, then they picked it up later on. And of course, the problem with that is you have to play catch up. And if you're not caught up on the midway mark, you got a major issue. And in the case of Sussex County, that slump came in the second half. And, a second ago, I said we thought they were going to be good batting, but questionable pitching. They were a bad batting team, too. They were at best league average on base and things of that sort, but then they would go out and hit 160 as a team, and that's just not going to produce much. They didn't hit a lot of home runs either. But from a pitching perspective, third best, the third fewest runs allowed. Hell, they were 3 runs off from being second fewest, for whatever that will count for. They were the 4th best for ERA with a 4.12, so not that far off. I mean, Quebec, again, was a half run better than the next closest team. But if you put it, to that second comparable team, which is Evansville, they were only about 0.2 off, a little under that. So a fifth of a run difference in, grant you're significantly fewer amount of innings pitched, 28 fewer innings. But even still, they were a solid pitching team. They were an upper quadrant pitching team. So, that really is what kept them alive. But the problem with pitching, and I think this is something that, especially if you go back and listen to that 166, we really favored teams that we were like, ooh, this is a good pitching team. And one thing that at least for me, that I'm coming to realize, and I should have realized more, and it kind of goes back to one thing I remember, like one teacher in high school that was a big Met fan, so we talked baseball a lot, would say was, you can't win a ball game without scoring runs. It's very obvious, but it's like you have to score at least 1 run to win the game. So if you're a fantastic pitching team, sooner or later you're going to allow a run. And if you're a terrible batting team, you're more likely to allow a run because a pitcher just had 1 bad pitch out of about 75, 85, 95 that he threw that winds up taking that batter takes that bad pitch and sends it 400 yards deep or 400 feet deep. And now it's 1-0. And if your offense can't find that other run, that's tough because it's a lot easier to not get a hit than it is to allow a hit. As contradicting as I may say, you could be the best pitching team and still lose. And I think that's the case here in Sussex. It's just they didn't get the hits when they got the pitching. And then when they didn't get the pitching, they still didn't get the hits. And they were able to kind of piece together. They were a good enough team to be 7 games above 500. But in the end, if you don't get the pitching, or you don't get the batting rather, it doesn't matter if you're the 4th best pitching team in the league, because at the end of the day, they average 4 runs against, so you need to average 5 runs for, and that didn't happen.
Well, and I think the traits of the minors that you just described, Nick, what does that describe? That describes a team that is very prone to be very streaky, and that's what they were. If there is a team out there that is consistently good pitching wise the entire season, God bless them, because that team then they've cracked the code of baseball. Because there is no way, and the hope is that your offense at least is going to be more consistent. than your pitching staff. Now, of course, you need a good pitching staff to help carry you, but with those traits, ultimately that falls under a team that is streaky. Its characteristics fit them, and I think at the end of the day, there's and I know I assume we'll talk about this later when we get into like something. I mean, this is a Sussex County team with a lot of questions coming into this season, and I know we'll talk about that more later. But they are one of the more fascinating teams, I think, coming into this season.
Oh, absolutely there. And I mean, like, especially when you start getting into the weeds on it and seeing how many guys they're losing. And obviously there's a reason for that. And I'd love to do like either a video or a piece on just that kind of exodus and what that means and everything. And certainly we'll go over it when we get into the previews. But yeah, it's very interesting. And just kind of wrapping up on the Miners for this year, when the bulk of your offense comes from Juan Silverio, who he played 94 games for him, and I just totally forgot. Like, because I still think of, Valley Cat, but listed 94 games, nearly every game with the Miners, which is still kind of freaking me out here. But when your bulk of your offense is coming from Silverio, Figueroa, Mikey Reynolds, and David Mayberry, that's not exactly a recipe for success in the long run. Jawan Harris is going to get some credit here for hitting 12 home runs too, but when you hit 250, you're kind of limited in your ability there as well. And then you kind of go through, and then there's a bunch of other guys. Like you have a guy like Alex Terrell who goes ahead, plays 34 games, hits 284. It's like not bad. Errol Robinson, who every time I see him, I think Errol Flynn, but that's neither here nor there. He had a good year before he got picked up by the Cardinals, and then you kind of go into that. And those guys are doing your heavy lifting, and so you really need them to do a good job, and when they don't, then it kind of backfires on you. And also, let's be real with ourselves here. When you look at the starting pitching too, it's really like 3 guys that are doing most of it, and that's Dwayne Marshall, who balled out, by the way. 20 starts, over 100 innings pitched, and he had a 2.67 ERA. Vin Mazzar was not particularly good. Michael Mediavilla was pretty average. Connor Dand was very good, especially under the rookie 2, which Marshall, Dand, and the guy we're about to talk about, and John Baker, all rookie 2, so they should all be back if they weren't sent over to New Jersey. But Dand 3.56, and Baker also at 2.67. Dand 81 innings to Baker's 104. Baker was more of kind of like a swing guy. Half of his appearances were out of the bullpen. So the point still remains. There was a couple of guys that were really doing well, and then there was a bunch of guys that weren't doing good. And so it really wasn't like you had a lot of choices, a lot of options, a lot of availability there. And that's kind of where the issues became. But yeah, like Rob Klimchuk was great out of the bullpen. Boyntz was good out of the bullpen. And then you start looking, and then you have guys that appeared in 15 or fewer games. And then that's a problem when you're appearing in 15 of 96 games. And I understand relievers aren't like an everyday dude. I understand they're like a 2 or 3 time a week dude. But even still, a bit of an issue when you're going to Klimchuk in 34 of 96 games. It's a bit of an issue when, Boyntz is 24 of those games, and how many of these were overlap. Cody Whitten, also good, 21 games. So, yeah, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So, Tyler Thornton was also here for a little bit too. Good for him. But, yeah, with that said, I think we kind of made our point about Sussex County. Good pitching team, fringe playoff team. So we were a little bit off on really got on one thing, questionable on another thing. But in the end, the big picture we got right.
Right.
So
Good go us.
Exactly. So, I'm going to score that as a win for us. And on that note, we said on paper things are different than they are in the field. That's not always true, because we're about to talk about Empire State. And on paper, we said this was a very bad ball club. Did not play in 21, obviously. And as we said during that review, we said the one-year team Empire State grades, which also appears to be wrong, as now they are a multi-year team in the Empire State grades. So we won't make the same mistake of calling them a one-year team again. We said they'll be slightly better than the Apollos were, and that their batting's going to be bad, but their pitching is going to be horrific. They don't have a hope at the postseason. We were right in all that, except for saying that they'd be slightly better than the Apollos, because if you notice, I never said their record in 22, because their record in 22 was 6-90. including a near historically long losing streak of, 32 or 34 games in a row. And before they finally beat Tri-City, which you saw it coming because they almost won the day before, and then they blew, I don't want to say blew them out, but there was no doubt they won the game they won. And I can't imagine that locker room was exactly fun. Not that I think Pete tore into them, because it's baseball. Anyone can win on any given day. But when you have a team that's riding a 30-game loser, man, you don't want to be the team that loses to them. That's just one of those, you walk in there and it's very silent. It's very quiet, because you don't need to speak, because you know, it's like, we lost to them. And that's a problem.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly, the Empire State was by far the worst traveling team that we've ever seen in the history of independent league baseball.
It's certainly up there, yeah.
And I think it's got to be the worst. Like, even the different like teams that we've seen have not been 6-90 bad. And there's just not much to say. There's just no talent. There are guys moving in and out. It was just a train wreck. And like, even though you had a team like that was a set roster at the beginning of the year, whatever, they just were horrible. They just won 6 out of 96 games. Like, I don't know how else to phrase that. We thought they were going to be terrible. They were terrible, but they were more terrible than we thought they were going to be. So that's about all I think you can say.
We managed to somehow overestimate the Empire State Grays. It's really the best way of phrasing it. And I don't think either one of us ever thought that was going to be possible. And maybe we were being a little overly optimistic. Maybe the mental frame we were when we discussed them in detail in the preview was, let's take the optimistic side of this. Maybe they go ahead and in 96 games, they wind up winning 20 of them. Let's be optimistic about it. You know, they'll be bad. They'll be significantly worse than the worst permanent team, but they won't be that bad. Maybe that was our thought process. But
I guess so.
We really thought double-digit wins was going to be kind of achieved. Granted, I think we both could confidently say we didn't think they were getting to double digits before like middle to end of July, the best case scenario. But, you know, I think we all really did think they were going to get to at least 10. We at least thought 10 and 86. And even then, I think if we went back to like May and you're like, this team's not even going to win 9 games, I think we would have even said like, I don't know. Like, you got to be pretty bad to not even just accidentally fall into a win every 2 weeks. Like, that's the thing that gets me. Is like, they felt like, because you play, half of May, June, July, August, not really September. So, like, what's that wind up working out to be? 4, 8, 12, about 14 weeks. They won a game every 14 days. Like, you would just kind of assume you fall like ass backwards into a win every 10 days, every week even. Like, that's what gets me. And like, the thing is too, like, I look at this, and I think we did this at the end of the year too, but like, Trey Woosley was not bad for a rookie first baseman, 7 home runs, and he hit nearly 270. Now, granted, his on base is under 300. It's only 0.03 higher than his batting average. So, I mean, make of that what you will. That tells me he strikes out a lot. But even still, like, there's something there. Jose Mercado wasn't god-awful. He stole 23 bases, and he did something productive. Jordan Holloman Scott, he was all right. There's a couple guys like Manny Garcia. He had double-digit home runs. That's not terrible. And considering the team that was in front of some of these pitchers, like Connor McGuire and Johnson Aries, those were decent pitchers. They had like ERA slightly above 7, and I can't believe I'm saying that. Slightly above 7 is a decent ERA after I just burned like some minor pitchers for having an ERA around 5. But they at least had a real team in front of them. These guys, I mean, they were thrown to the wolves, really. I mean, thankfully, Holden Bernard managed to get out of there after 16 innings and a sub-2 ERA, and I don't understand how the hell he managed that, but good for him. But yeah, like, there were some redeemable pieces, but as a team, this was just a clunker, and I'm honest to God terrified of what's going to be rolled out there in 23. I hope it's better with Mark Mason there now, and him bringing in some York guys. It gotta be better. But, I mean, I've still got them pegged for under 30 wins because it's at the end of the day, it's Empire State and I haven't seen enough. So yeah.
Agreed.
Or I think we're best just moving on to New Jersey now, because I don't think there's anything nice we could really say about this team that we haven't said.
Right. I 100% agree.
All right. So we'll go on to the New Jersey Jackals and what would wind up being their last year in Yogi Berra Stadium. They went 45-49. The previous year in 21, they were 39-56. So an improvement, a notable improvement, 6-game improvement on the season. They missed the postseason in 21. Again, they would miss in 22. Of course, we had them being a weak pitching team with some good vets, but little improvement elsewhere. Not a particularly deep team. I will give myself credit though, because I said Dalton Combs could be a guy who really does improve this year, and he did. But the kind of thing where we were like, the thing we kind of kept coming back to was Alfredo Marte and Santiago Chirino are going to have to carry this team, and pitching wise, there really isn't too much here. And, well, yeah, when you're not a good team, there really isn't much there. And in the case of the Jackals, while they didn't finish 56 games out of a playoff or out of first place like the Grays did, they were still 16 games out from that and about 10 and a half games out of a playoff spot. So they still weren't exactly killing the game. They weren't exactly good at pitching either. By that, I mean they finished third from the bottom with an ERA as a team of 6, and removing the Grays from everything here, because I think that's the only fair thing to do. They were second worst, only to Three Rivers, which I'm going to have to eat some crow on later on, or I guess in this case, eat some eagle on later on. But, yeah, overall as a unit, not particularly great. They weren't really killing it, but they did hit well. So again, we really got to question what we know and don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we won. I think we chalk that up as another W for us.
We're killing the East so far, aren't we?
We are killing the East so far. And I have to say, like, I think the Jackals, and listen, there's a lot of respect for a lot of people that were there, but and they had a great run, of course, in the Can-Am League. But they have not made, on the field, they have not made a very successful transition to the Frontier League at this point. And it has been a struggle for them. So I think they were a team that proved that they were in need of a reboot, a refresh. I think that's exactly what they got with Bobby Jones. Obviously not in the dugout, but he's calling the shots.
Yeah. And PJ Phelps is a fantastic manager too. Like, let's not discredit that. He's very, very good, and he's proved at both the Pacific Association and Atlantic League he can win, especially when you give him a full toolbox to work with. So
exactly.
This is a good spot for him.
Yes, and I mean, it's an organization that has won, but it just has not translated to the Frontier League, and it's been the similar problems on the pitching end of things, where they just do not have the quality of depth as far as arms are concerned that will kind of push them towards contention. Because, I mean, like you said, they were 45-49 as their final record.
Yep.
The problem is, though, let's say if you take Empire State out of the equation, I mean, they're probably a team that's, I don't know, like 15 games under. So
I wouldn't necessarily go 15 under, but I think I'm just going to quickly look back to last week when I have everything written down there. I think they're much more in line with like probably more like a Windy City. Like they went 33-62, so I don't think they're 30 games under, but I think they're, you know, more in line with that kind of quality of team. I mean, you know.
Yeah. So I think until they can figure out the pitching end of things and how to get quality arms in for an entire Frontier League season, it's going to be tough to compete in a division like this, where, I mean, you have some monsters in this division, and it's really tough every year. And the Jackals just have not really been up to the challenge so far, and it's been close. And they have a good core of veterans that they continue to stick with, and that have done a good job for them. But you're still on the pitching end of things. It has continued to be rough. So they're going to have to switch that. They're going to have to try and change that around with a new regime going into Hinchcliffe. And I think there's a pretty good shot that they do it, because there is a really smart staff in place that is going to go along with that.
Yeah, and they also now have the benefit of kind of picking through the bones of the minors and Bobby kind of taking the guys he wants. I mean, you look through the transaction page on the Frontier League website, and that's very clear. There's a lot of trades where a lot of very valuable minors are now Jackals, and I mean, there's reasons for that, certainly, but they have that, plus they have the guys that, they took too. So I would agree with that there is a foundation here. And I don't even necessarily think that this is an indictment on the job Brooks carried it, because Brooks still won them a championship in the Can-Am. But I just, I look at this year's team in particular, and the thing that I come to is they were a bad team with a lot of really good players. Because I'm looking at, the batting here.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because, you have a Trevor Abrams, 77 games. He had an on-base of nearly 380. He hit over 300. He had 11 home runs. Alfredo Marte, a former major leaguer, 83 games, hit about 300, on base about 350, hit 18 home runs, had 82 RBIs. Santiago Trino, he's good for batting 300. He did bat 300, 84 games, 87 games. Jason Agresti, a guy that's been around the block now for a little bit between the Jackals and the Boulders, 287, 8 home runs, 50 RBIs. You look at Justin Wiley. He's one of the several guys here that have over 15 home runs and over 70 RBIs. In his case, 20 home runs, 77 RBIs, and he batted over 300 on base of nearly 400. Another guy in the same boat, batted 325, nearly on base of 400, hit 29 home runs with nearly 80 RBIs, ran over 100 strikeouts, but I mean, with the kind of power production, the numbers everywhere else, you can live with it. In Josh Rewalt, another guy there. Dalton Combs, the guy I mentioned earlier, he batted over 350, on base over 400, 14 home runs, and he walked one fewer time than he struck out. So 48 to 49 there, and he had 77 RBIs. A lot of guys here are over that 80 hit threshold as well. So batting wise, there's a lot of guys here. And I mean, Yogi isn't the best place for pitching, I grant you. I mean, though some guys did well, but even still, Angelo Baez worked out well. Tavares threw a no-hitter. Granted, I mean, that's, call it what it is. He put up a lot of pitches in that no-hitter too, and it was impressive. But there's guys there too. Gregorio is another guy there. There was pieces there. It just overall as a team, they just didn't really work out. And it's kind of like the inverse of the minors, where it's you get the pitching, but you won't get the hitting. And if you're not going to get the hitting, you can't win a 0-0 ball game. The flip side of that coin is you're not going to win a lot of 10-9 ball games. That's just not how baseball works. Most pitchers aren't going to flinch that much. And it's still a game where more often than not, you're not going to get on base. Even if you hit, 400, that tells me that, you only get on base, you only get a hit 4 out of every 10 times you step up to the plate. So that means the other 6 times you're making an out. That's good enough for 2 innings worth of outs. So, you're still more likely to not score than score. So, it's just one of those things where some guys just really raked and really mashed. And, I understand Indy ball doesn't work like this because of just the nature of it. But this was the kind of team where I was really hoping on some level the Jackals will just say, screw it, we're going to go sell. And just sell Dalton Combs, sell Josh Rewalt, sell, as many guys as they could to other teams. That way we could have gotten a legit playoff pitch. Because just imagine if you would have added a Josh Rewalt, or better yet, a Dalton Combs, I think would have fit Skylands a little bit better. Add Dalton Combs over to the minors. I think they're a playoff team now, to be quite honest. He adds the bat that you missed. Now, granted, I don't think they're beating, either team that wound up making the postseason over them. And I certainly don't think they're beating Quebec, but they could have made it. That's all just sidetracked. More to the Jackals. A lot of really good individual performances that just didn't come together as a team. And at the end of the day, that's a problem when it's a team sport.
I mean, the only thing I think I can add there is that we've known since the Jackals have come into the Frontier League that veterans and guys at the top of as far as production is not going to be an issue for them because they have such a solid core. Your Alfredo, Jason Agresti, just to name a couple. But it's just, how are you going to make the transition and find those younger guys that teams like Quebec have had no problem finding? Teams like and of course, I mean, teams like Ottawa had no problem finding in their first year in the Frontier League last year. So that's where I think, Jones and Phillips kind of running the show there is really going to help because that's certainly the change that they need to get production from those rookies, from those guys with very little professional experience, because they have the veterans taken care of. Great. I'm not understating how important that is, because it is. But at the same time, it's hard when the vast majority of rookies that they're bringing in are not performing, and it's tough to win that way, and especially in the monster division that the Frontier League East is.
Yeah, and I mean, the next team we're going to talk about, because I think we can kind of move to that next team now, in the New York Boulders, they had a guy that's still technically rookie too, that was a Jackal in Chris Quitzer, and he balled out this year with 20 home runs, 96 RBIs, and batted over 300. And that's, I mean, obviously they didn't need too much batting help, but that's an example of a young guy that really performed. And you can kind of go through here. And I feel like the Boulders were the best version of the Jackals, because they were also a dominant hitting team, best hitting team in the league. I think we could confidently say, as when you go over and you look at the hitting stats, they were the second best team average-wise. Jackals had them beat there, but it was only by 5 points, so it's not like it's this huge thing. They were better on base. They were better slugging. They had more home runs. Obviously, it comes with the slugging. They had way more walks, 410 walks. I believe that led the league in walks. Oh, no, they were fourth in the league in walks. My mistake. 442 walks in the minors. Let me just appreciate that. They weren't getting hits, but they were drawing with a lot of walks. Good for them. But, yeah, in any case, runs scored, they blew the competition out of the water. Like, the second place team had 624 runs. That was the Valley Cats. We'll talk about them at the end. The Boulders, they had 707. Nearly 80 more runs scored. That's the difference. That's why Tri-City wound up being out of the postseason, despite being a very good offensive team. And the Boulders made it and hosted the wild card game. That's the difference right there, those 80 runs. But regardless, if you want to go into the pitching even, let's go through some of the important pieces of the Boulders. And we'll go through the typical stuff I always go through in a second. Alex Mack started 15 games, rookie 1. Andrew Hammond, rookie 2, started 12 games. Danny Warchansky, rookie 2. Obviously, we know Warchansky and what he's done. And he got a lot of bullpen work this year, too. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but whatever. July Sosa, rookie 1, started the wild card game, did not have a good start, but overall good year, 3.57, so not bad. Granted, a lot of these things with the Boulders, too, they don't really have a lot of dedicated stars. Robbie Rowland was, and for the back pretty much was. He only had 4 bullpen reliefs appearances, but even still, a lot of these guys are, they're rookies. That's the main point here. Kyle Mott, he only got in a couple of games, but he was also a rookie here. You look through Ryder Yackel, rookie 1. Really, when you go through, it's easy to just point out the experienced guys, and that's Matt Leone, who was dominant on the bullpen, sub-2 ERA, only 15 innings pitched, though, so that's part of it. Robbie Rowland, real workhorse for him, 122 innings. Laertes Pena, and he just wasn't very good. 32 innings pitched out of the bullpen, nearly a 7 ERA. And Zach Schneider, who, again, experienced, got the most work out of the bullpen, 34 appearances, 4 wins, 4 losses, 4 saves for him, 53 innings pitched, 323. Everyone else is either rookie 1 or rookie 2. And that goes to the point about the rookies as a whole. And obviously we'll have a lot of other things to talk about with the Boulders here, but the Boulders, they kind of follow that same mold, because if you know formerly Palisades Credit Union Ballpark, but now Clover Park, you know that it's a place where you can hit a lot of home runs because there's some short porches there, and really just don't hit anything to center field and you'll have yourself a good time. And if you're hitting it to center field, put it back far, it's an extra base hit. That's how that operates out there. And we came in expecting an improved team with plus bats. We expected a playoff contender, or I should say, Will, you expected a playoff contender.
I was very high on the Boulders.
Yeah, I will admit I was wrong on this. I said they were a 500 team because that's what they are. I was like, they're about a 6-game under 500 team. They can't put it together. But obviously, I was wrong. And they were a very good team. You are right on the Boulders. I will give you that. After they missed the postseason the year prior, they posted a wild card game. And as I was saying, they're what the Jackals could have been. They're arguably what the Jackals should have been. They got the handful of good pitching performances they needed. Obviously, when you have Danny Warchansky, who's would you say he's a top 4 pitcher in this league, top 5 pitcher in the league?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, so when you have a top 5 pitcher, it helps out a lot. And then when you have a couple of guys out of the bullpen that you can reliably count on, okay, we're going to give him the ball. We could throw him 50 times, 50 innings across a third of the season, and we'll be safe with him. When you have those kinds of guys and with that kind of offense, you feel comfortable. You feel confident in it.
Yeah.
And, it's just one of those situations there. So I will give them that credit. And I think they did a lot of really good things this year. And I'm going to be very interested to see TJ Stanton as he continues to build this team and build out this roster, because they were a surprisingly good team here. But I will say this much. You take out that 12-game winning streak, and it's a different story here too. I mean, let's be real. If they're playing, of those 12 games that they won in a row to end the year, let's say they're even just 7-5, all of a sudden it's a different story. They're 52 and 43.
But you can't take away the 12-game winning streak the same way you can't take away Sussex County's big losing streaks in the middle of the year too.
Fair enough. Obviously I'm fair enough to say, but also how common are 12-game winning streaks though, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the what makes baseball such a beautiful game is getting hot at the right time is sometimes the best possible skill that a team can have. Just ask the Schaumburg Boomers.
Oh, yeah. How fluky would it have been to have the Boulders or the Titans playing the Boomers? Would that have just been the most fluky thing?
Yeah, that would be fun. That'd be all. I'd be all for that, honestly.
See, I'd be for it just because it's a lot of really hot teams, and you want the hottest teams playing in the postseason. I think maybe not necessarily the best, because we had the whole regular season to see the best, but you want the teams that are playing at their peak to go out in the postseason. I think that's at least my opinion. Yeah. But yeah, what talk more about the Boulders for a bit before we shoot up north of the border.
The Boulders more so are in kind of a unique spot when it comes to roster building, just because, for example, if you're the GM of the Boston Red Sox, you cannot build a team and not have a good offense. If you're the Red Sox and you don't have a good offense, your team's not going to be very good. And I think just because the dimensions of the ballpark and the way that it plays, because pitching is harder there, it is harder at that ballpark. So I think that the lineup was perfectly built from Stanton. A lot of left-handed power as well. That it was perfectly crafted, I think, for the situation that the ballpark presents itself, and the pitching was good enough to make them a contender, and that's kind of how I was thinking of it. I think there's an offense that'll mash, and I think there's a pitching staff that'll be good enough, and that's ultimately what they were. They were mediocre for a lot of the year. That's true, but they got red hot down the stretch. They had a couple quality arms that really carried them, and of course it all comes down to one game, and that one game obviously didn't go very well for them against Ottawa, but I think at the same time, though, it was a pretty massive step forward for TJ Stanton and the Boulders organization that I guess hasn't really seen a whole lot of success in recent years. And I think the Boulders have to be a team that's going to be in the top 2 or top 3 of the Frontier League in runs scored every year, or else they're not going to be contending in the division. So I think they were perfectly built. They were a team that could really mash, and they were a really good squad. And they got hot at the right time. They deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And I think we really saw a TJ Stanton kind of footprint on this team as well. I mean, when you look at those last few years in Three Rivers with him, his teams could hit really well. And so you put a guy that can put together good offensive teams in a ballpark that's conducive to offense, you're going to like results. And so I'd like that. I'm just going to be very curious to see the pitching going forward, because obviously, again, I could read through stats here, but amongst guys that were regulars in their lineup, meaning 70 or more games, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys that hit 280 or better. 5 guys that hit 300 or better. And amongst home run hitters, 320 home run guys, 118 home run guy, and a 16 home run guy in Tucker Nathans, who only played in 47 games, mind you. So they had some really, really productive guys here. Chris Quitzer, David Vinsky, Jake McKenzie, Max Smith. The list goes on. Gabriel Garcia, Giovanni Garibaldi. You know, the list kind of go on. Austin Dennis. Point is, you can name guys. These guys could hit.
And when you have a lineup that is that deep, it helps everybody out because you have that protection in the lineup, and you're going to see pitchers to hit because you can't pitch around anybody the way maybe you could to a Sussex County team. I think is a perfect contrast to that, where pitchers can kind of game plan around. Hey, all we got to do is get through 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 in the lineup, and you're smooth sailing. You can't do that with the Boulders. You're going to have to throw strikes, and in a division where the pitching was suspect on some of the teams, like you're talking about Tri-City in New Jersey, and of course Empire State, it's a good fit, and that's why I think that offense was so successful.
Absolutely, I have to agree with you there. And also, let's also keep in mind there's a lot of just regular guys in that lineup. You had the majority of those guys playing 70 plus of the 96 games. So when you have like 6 to 8 guys that are going to be playing every day, you maybe give them a day off a week, maybe 2 days off every 10 days. You know, that's reliability there. And when they can go out and perform too, that's an added bonus. And then you look at some of the depth pieces there that played in 40 or so games. That allows you to really mix and match and have a lot of faith in whatever guy you're going to run out there. And it makes it even harder to game plan around because as a pitcher, you go, it doesn't really matter who's up because, hey, it's not going to be fun regardless. So, yeah, I agree with that a lot. And I think New York's a very fun team to watch going forward. And I'm going to be interested to see how they play it out. And they certainly beat up on my preconceived notion this year of they're a 500 club. They're more than a 500 club now. That being said, I'm going to be curious to see if they can get those hot runs again. But baseball's baseball, right? It's going to happen, and then anything could happen. On that note, we go north of the border. We got 4 teams left and some questions to go over after that, and then we'll be done with a marathon episode if we keep it all together, or maybe this just gets splintered off into its own thing. Who knows? But Ottawa didn't play in 21, obviously. And so they got their first real season in 22, 56-39 in 22. Good for them. We expect them to be a very good team from a starting pitching perspective, maybe have some batting issues. Will, you were slightly higher on them, saying they're going to be slightly better than New York. I was high on them. We both agreed playoff contender. So overall, I'd say we nailed that one. They were more than a playoff contender. They really gave the Capitals a scare in round 2. They dismantled the Boulders, and quite frankly, they were both, I think you could say, the hottest teams in the Frontier League when they met, and it resulted in a pretty good matchup there, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a great matchup, and I think that ultimately they were right up there with Quebec at the end, and being 1 game away from the championship series. And I think that. And I can't emphasize enough when I talk about Ottawa how great of a job Bobby Brown did.
Oh, absolutely.
With that squad. I mean, just the fact, and he was put in a really tough position where you're talking about Ottawa, and it's kind of an unstable situation he's kind of coming into, and then you can come up with all the excuses in the book that they didn't have a team last year, and you're totally building from scratch. And he did a great job building a team that had depth, a team that had pop and roster, and really a lot of depth. So I think Bobby Brown did a terrific job with that team, and they were right up there at the top of the standings for a vast majority of the season. And I think Brown deserves a lot of credit at the top for that. And hey, I mean, it ultimately didn't end up going their way in the postseason, but they got a big win over New York. I mean, they crushed them in that 1 game playoff, and then Again, I mean, they a couple bounces here and there against Quebec from being in the championship series, which is a great accomplishment for what the adversity and the set of circumstances that team was dealt going into last season. And I'm excited to see what more they have in store for the future.
Absolutely. Like, this is a team that really, I think, surprised a lot of us. I think overall, this is just a solidly built team. AJ Wright came out of seemingly nowhere as a rookie, 88 games, 12 home runs. He hit 277. Like, production out of a guy that we knew nothing of. Fantastic. Liam MacArthur, stand up and take a bow. 85 games. He didn't hit any home runs, but he hit 326. And he got himself the hell out of Empire State. So he saved his own self. Jackie Urbaez really stepped up and became an actual threat batting and a fantastic fielder too. He hit 10 home runs, something I never thought he'd actually be able to do. And he nearly hit 300 too, and he drew some walks as well. Jacob Sanford, the real star of this team offensively, played almost every game, 22 home runs, on base of almost 400. All in all, solid there. And then you look at the pitching wise. Zach Westcott kept him alive for parts of this season, even though he started to struggle later on. But in the beginning, he was really, really good. Gavin Saunier wasn't really a starter, but out of the bullpen, he was fantastic. Evan Grills was great. Tyler Jardin was great. And everyone else just kind of fit in and did their job. Like, this is just a team of everybody did their job. Matt Valen, fantastic job. Kevin Esquera, fantastic job. 17 saves as a closer. You know, he did a great job there. Serrano, he looked very good too in his appearances, only really working one inning at a time, but he came up when it mattered. It was just a lot of guys that I think the best way of putting it did their job. And I mean, Tyrus Green's another guy. He's more of an experienced player, yeah, but batting 300 as a catcher, that provides some value right there. I mean, like that's a very, very good addition there. And you look through the starting nine, and there really isn't a weak batter. You look through the pitching staff, and there isn't anyone that's really horrendously bad, and there really isn't anyone that's tremendously great either. It's just a team of really solid, you know, tough to beat guys, and that's how you win baseball games. And that's just the model of this team. They were above average just about everywhere. They did their job, and that's what got them where they were.
Yeah, exactly. And there just weren't a lot of weak links on that team. And you know, you mentioned Westcott, he's been good for multiple years now, so it's not really a surprise. But I think that they're a team that the foundation is absolutely laid to be a contender once again, and it'll be fun to see them construct their roster this year as well.
Exactly. So with that, we got 3 more teams left. Let's push to the end here. Quebec, again, another didn't play in 20 because of the joint team venture. 62 and 34 and 22. At no point were we ever really like, oh, they may be in danger. It was just like, oh, they're doing what we expected, because we expected a playoff lock, a lot of big names, huge bats, deep team on both sides of the ball, loads of weapons. These are all the notes I wrote down here. A very good rotation and bullpen. I think it's fair to say we could probably ignore the stats here because they're all just going to back up what we said, which is this is a very good team. They're going to be a hard out, and they're going to fight like hell, and they're going to win a lot of games. And this is the only team that we can confidently say is a playoff lock.
Right, and they ended up being that, and it was on, like, I remember those episodes from the summer, Nick, where it was all ultimately like, oh my God, Quebec is 4-6 in their last 10. What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And that'd be like the lead story in the Frontier League. So I think it just shows really, I mean, how strong of a team that, and they've been a powerhouse for a decade now.
Yeah.
But in Can-Am League or not, but I mean, Scalabri's done a great job there, and I think that there's just a ton of depth, a ton of great arms, and what really impressed me the most is, despite the fact they were the best team in the regular season by quite a bit, they were undisputed. that is a target on your back come postseason time. And we see, I mean, how many times do we see this in Major League Baseball where the team let's talk about the LA Dodgers who win like 108 games a season and they never get to the World Series. So I think that they deserve a lot of credit because they had a very tough series against a really good Ottawa squad. They took their best punch. They faced adversity come to the end of the season. They ended up getting the win. And, of course, a great championship series they had against Schaumburg, too. So I think that's what really impressed me is that it's not like they were a team that just ran through everybody come postseason time. They had to deal with their adversity here and there, and they did a great job. And they won a lot of tight battles, and that's what championship teams do, and that's ultimately why they ended up taking it all.
Yeah, like that's the most impressive thing, like you said, is that they had the knife to their throat a couple of times, especially against Ottawa, where you really are like, they're about to get knocked out. The best team is about to lose. And they just find a way, as though it's some sort of cheesy 80s action movie, to just kick the bad guy off of them and just dispatch them. And it was incredible, the kind of effort there. And like I said, I could go over everything here, but you have a Jeffrey Parra who hits 32 home runs in 86 games. You have a bunch of other guys here. Like, I think I'd safely say that we were pretty much right on just about everything here. The only two things is, one, you had Josh McAdams as like your player of the year. He wound up only hitting 222 in a handful of games. So that wasn't great. Yeah, that was like the only misstep. That I think we kind of undersold, particularly me. I think that we kind of undersold Miguel Cienfuegos. We were like, Cienfuegos, Pava, Austin, and like Huertas. These are like four really great arms. And they were. Austin was probably the lesser of them. Him and Fuentes were basically the same guy. Although they were both very good, threw a lot of good innings. And Fuentes was less of a starter, more of a reliever. But Pava threw a 3.14 ERA, which on a lot of teams would be the best guy, and it's still a very good year. But then, Miguel Cienfuegos turns around and 21 starts, 131 innings. He only loses 2 games. Not that that's a great indicator, but he only allowed 26 earned runs across the whole year, only 26 walks across the whole year, 106 strikeouts, sub-2 ERA, 5 home runs against. Just minor stuff like that.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable arm, and he showed it time and time again.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that if you take out Marshall Schill, if you take him out, no one had an ERA above 6.99. That was the next highest.
Yeah, that'd be the best ERA on Empire State.
Yeah. You're honestly not wrong, but yeah, we could continue to go around and around on Quebec, but I mean, as far as dominance goes, as far as quality of team, I think they are by far the best this year. So with that, we can go to Trois-Rivières or Three Rivers, however you prefer to say it. At any point, they didn't play in 21, they played in 22, almost an identical record to the Jackals, 45 and 50. In 22, the expectation was the batters were going to be very good. There was pitching concerns, high-powered offense, but the arms must perform. That was the thing that it really came down to. And I was very, very high on this team. I was like, the bats are going to carry them. The arms will come through enough. They'll be a playoff team. I'm sure of it. And I felt like Charles Barkley, where I could guarantee it.
Guaranteed.
And like Charles guarantees, it didn't quite happen. But, Will, you were pretty spot on where you're like, I don't trust those arms. They're a borderline playoff team. And the only thing is they really weren't even borderline because they weren't very good overall. And, we could dive into that a little bit now, can't we?
Yeah, look, I think the arms are just, there's not many reliable arms. I mean, I think that as a team ERA, I'm pretty sure they were like over 6.5. That's going to be tough to win many baseball games that way against the tough lineups that they're facing. And yeah, the pitching, it's really, sometimes you don't have to make it. You don't have to make it more complicated than it is. The pitching just wasn't good, and it was. Then I'm not even talking about just they weren't good. I mean, they were bottom 2, bottom 3 pitching staff in the league, and if you're down there, your offense better be pretty friggin' incredible to back that up. I mean, you look at the Boulders, who had the best offense in the league by far, and ultimately, like, if their pitching staff was what Three Rivers was, they would not have been close to a playoff team. So I think that it's really just not more complicated than the arms just were not good enough for Three Rivers, and that's something they're going to have to improve come this offseason.
Yeah, this is where earlier I said I was going to have to eat some crow, or rather eagle, that this is exactly it. I think I was guilty of exactly that. I really thought the bats were going to carry them. I thought they were going to kind of be, and I guess I thought they were going to be what the Jackals wound up being, only I thought that the pitching was going to be good enough. But the problem, of course, is when you take out Tucker Smith, who threw less than 33 innings, no one has a sub-3 ERA. And as a team, they have, well, I mean, Juan Santana did, but he threw 4 innings. That doesn't count.
No.
And you were right. They had a 6.56, and that is the worst. Of course, that's assuming we take out the Grays. And if we take out the Grays again, then they threw the fewest innings too. And I was really thinking someone was going to step up, but Heinrich didn't step up. He didn't pitch enough. Really only 3 starters really pitched enough. That's Osman Gutierrez, an experienced guy, about 5. SBS, Sam Bellier, Springer, not good enough, over 7. Sam Poliquin, not good enough. Matt Rush's team, as a guy that was an Eagle for a long time and a very good Eagle pitcher for a long time, just did not inhabit anything like that. And looking at the batting too, it just wasn't good enough. Carlos Martinez was very good. He hit over 330. He hit 16 home runs too. And Steve Brown was pretty solid. Connor Panis, he had some power. Juan Kelly was Juan Kelly. Juan Santana was also solid. He pretty much put up good numbers across the board. LP Peltier had a career year, and Rafael Godot, he was his usual self. All these guys, high average hitters. Some of them put up some really strong power numbers as well. They got on base, but yeah, they didn't do enough as a team. So, I mean, like, I can't really add on to anything more than what you said. Well, I mean, I could go and find the stats to back up what you said, but I mean, at the end of the day, they screwed themselves. They shot themselves in the foot because they were just unable to pitch correctly. And,
yeah, the arms just weren't good enough. And I know I sound like a broken record, and I guess it's kind of ironic that this, we're talking about the Frontier League East division. It's a really good division. There's a lot of great lineups, and you got to have. And no one's saying that you got to be like there's a reason that the best pitching staffs in the league, obviously Quebec is kind of in a class of their own, but like for the most part, that the better offenses were in the East and the better pitching staffs were in the West. There's a reason for that. And the Three Rivers just did not have the talent, and if they thought they had the talent, whatever talent they thought they had, just did not execute.
Exactly. That's the exact way to put it. And on that note, we'll go to the final team we have, the Tri-City Valley Cats, 50-46-21. We don't need to rehash why they missed the postseason, but they did improve by about 4 games, 54-41 in 22. They were expected to be a well-rounded team, good bullpen, good rotation, solid bats. Depth carries into the postseason was the expectation. But like these other teams, and like we've been saying, and like, the broken record will says we sound like, they weren't a good pitching team. 3rd worst, again, removing Empire State, 5.84 team ERA. And they had what's becoming a trend of a slow start. And when you have a slow start, you have to really overcome an awful lot. They weren't able to do that. Obviously, they had some really good guys. They had some guys that really performed. Kumar Rocker, that news had just came out the day we recorded the preview. So that was kind of fun. We got lucky on that one. And he made somewhat of an impact, but not really enough. I mean, he never really was going to be that guy for them. But in the end, same boat, really. They weren't good enough batting to overcome the pitching, and the only team that really has a very good argument for being good enough batting to overcome the pitching is the Boulders, who are the only team with a 5 or greater ERA to overcome it.
Right, and this is something that I think Tri-City, they've been better than the Jackals, but I think they are similar in the sense of Pete Incaviglia has brought in a lot of great veterans, and he knows how to bring in veterans. And just right now, the arms just haven't been there the first 2 years, and it results. And listen, they're a good roster, they're a good team. It's just not enough to make the playoffs against some of the really talented teams in the East. And the pitching staff and not getting enough production from the rookies on the pitching staff and ends up really hurting a team like Tri-City. So, and there's championship aspirations there. There is. And we've, of course, the interviews not too long ago with Pete Incaviglia and Callahan as well. That's the expectation there. And it hasn't happened so far. They've had good teams, but the arms have really been a problem for Tri-City. But that also shouldn't take away for how good their offense. We could talk for hours about how amazing Brantley Bell is, and we could probably have a whole Brantley Bell podcast of us, and I would probably be able to get back to Boston from where I am now. Yeah. So I think they have some really good talent, no doubt about it. But the pitching staff just needs to get better.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could just listen to our Pete Incaviglia interview, which is really fun to be able to say and plug, to talk about the individual guys, and Brantley Bell especially there. I mean, guy hits nearly 370 and 24 home runs to go with it. I mean, that's a solid year, plus stack on 32 stolen bases. I mean, that's a year that'll make anyone gush. Brad Zuniga was a solid player for him. Cito Culver really kind of started to discover his bat again there once he went from Sussex to Tri-City. Dennis Phipps, I mean, he's obviously a veteran for this league, and he'd be doing fine in the Atlantic League even, but he really, really showed up. He really, really raked. I mean, over 30 home runs, 90 RBIs, everything there. Pavin Park, same thing. He really made the jump from the Pioneer League to the Frontier League well, and he's going to be back next year for them. And I'd love to see him make another jump into, say, the American Association or Atlantic League, too, to see how he could adjust for that. Willie Garcia, for the limited playing time he had, was good. But the pitching, just to harp on it, one guy sub 3, and that's Trey Cochran-Gill. Now, I love that the law firm was there. And again, he was trying to drag this team single-handedly in his 51 innings of relief work and 14 saves. He tried to drag them.
Workhorse.
Exactly. The poor man's breaking his back for him, and they weren't able to do it. But if you remove Kumar Rocker and a couple of, position players, Cochran had the best, by far, ERA on this team. The next best is Joey Gonzalez, by far their best starting pitcher. 116 innings, basically 117. 363 ERA, solid. After that, there really isn't much. Abatello, I'm going to hope that's right. 21 innings, over 4. Next best guy. Adam Hoffick.
Who, Nick? Who had that? Who had those stats?
You know damn well who had those stats.
I don't know if I do.
Well, I'll go back. I'll cut that audio and I'll slap it back on. You can listen to the episode. Give us a free download. Adam Hoffick, though, he had a 4.5 ERA too. Brock Warren had a solid bit. And after them, they're all above 5. Point that stands, that's not good enough. And it's just never going to be good enough to win. And so that's where that is. And that is every team in the Frontier League. That is how we saw each team in the Frontier League. And the only thing we have left to do is a couple of burning questions and playoff teams. Will, your playoff teams were Quebec, which you had making the final, Tri-City, and Sussex County. I had Quebec, Tri-City, who I had making the final, and Three Rivers. So overall, we were both 1 for 3. Tri-City was a whiff on both of us. Bigger whiff by me because I had him somehow beating Quebec. I don't even know. I must have been high or something to think that. And we both kind of whiffed on the 3. Again, mine was worse than Sussex County. And yeah, so there's that. So that's how that worked. I assume you got to be close to Long Island now, right?
Well, I am on the island now. And it is truly impressive that we picked this up. That we started recording this episode right after I got gas in Framingham, Massachusetts, about 20 minutes outside of Boston, and I am now 12 minutes away from my house, and right like just a couple streets over from Hofstra, and I'm currently on Long Island. It is very, very impressive. I'm on the LIE at the moment. It's great stuff.
I almost feel like I should change the name of the episode from Silver Standard to Road Tripping, because this
road tripping.
Yeah, but to avoid having to do this in your car, let's get through these questions and then plug stuff and get out of here. Because I think we've made this drive go by quicker. Now, of course, I've just been sitting in an office chair for the last 2.5 hours, and you've been the one doing the driving, so really the heavy lifting on it. But I feel like this made it go by quicker.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's got me locked in, focused, thinking about baseball instead of, wow, I have 170 more miles to drive in friggin' Connecticut.
For a second, I thought you were still in Connecticut because, well, we all know how Connecticut could be. And if you were, I assume we would have been hearing small tangents.
Nick, it's almost two. For anyone who's listening. It is now currently 1:53 a.m. There is nobody on the road.
Connecticut is a sentient traffic jam, William. We both know this. It will just manifest traffic.
3 in the morning.
It will manifest traffic. We both know this. It just appears. It could be wide open. And no one has ever driven through Connecticut without hitting at least some traffic.
I did not hit any traffic through Connecticut tonight.
We need to get you a dash cam for your car so that way we could put that over the YouTube version. But
that's right. I'll prove it.
But we got 4 other questions for you. The first of which is, in 2022, blank was the most disappointing Frontier League East team.
Oh, Tri-City. That is easy money. I think they're expected to be, all right, you know what, first year you can reasonably say, hey, they're still kind of getting used to the league, getting used to trying to get rookies and stuff like that. But year 2, this is where they're going to start to turn it. Looked like they had a lot of talent on the roster. I mean, they did have a lot of talent on the roster. But yeah, just what we talked about as far as the pitching. We're not going to rehash it, but ultimately, I think they're an easy pick for most disappointing in the division.
I'm going to agree with you because I think they were by far the most disappointing. I will say, though, I'm going to pick Three Rivers instead, though, just because I was riding really high on them. I shouldn't be, because Tri-City, via expectation, everything that you said and everything that pointed towards them, they should have been better off than they were. But I'm just going to say 3 Rivers to be different because I really believed in them, and they were a team I thought was a lock for a 3 seed, which, again, I agree with what you said last week. We need to stop locking teams into the 3 seed. But yeah. So I'll say that. I will say 3 Rivers to be different, but I really agree with a lot of what you said with Tri-City. In 2022, though, blank was the most surprising Frontier League East team. Are we both going to agree with Ottawa?
I'm going to say Ottawa. Yeah, I think Ottawa is definitely the choice for me. I mean, from your end, if you weren't high on the Boulders, I guess you could say the Boulders, but I think Ottawa would be the one for me. Yeah,
I suppose. For me, though, like the Boulders too, they've always had that potential. I just kept doubting that they were going to reach it because they really hadn't reached it in quite some time. With Ottawa, I don't think we really, like we said, playoff contender and whatnot. And you had them being slightly better than New York. I was really high on them to begin with. But even still, to meet it, it's still kind of surprising. Like, it's one of those where I feel like I was almost saying, it'd be really cool if this happens. So I'm going to really hope it happens. And I'm going to really hype them up for them. I'm going to gas them up because I want it to be a thing. But for them to really come through, and for me, the fact that they did that well in the postseason is what kind of puts them over the top over, say, a New York. Because I don't really think they had any business making it as close as they did against Quebec and really putting the fear of God into them. And they really did. Like, this is a team where next year, if you told me that they were going to be the Eastern Division's team in the final, I could reasonably see a path for that.
I'd agree.
Yeah. All right, so question 3 here. Blank will be the most interesting team going into 2023, or was the most interesting team in 2022?
So the most interesting team going, I'm going to say the Jackals.
Yeah.
I think there's just so many storylines coming into the year with a new regime in there, a lot of brand new players on the roster. I think for me, it's got to be the Jackals. There's just so many. I think they're going to be a fascinating team to watch this year, in a really big make or break year for the franchise. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on the outside of and beyond just playing baseball, but ultimately on the field, it's a really big year for them.
I would agree with that too. I mean, I think you make a lot of good points, and again, I may sound a bit redundant here, but to prevent against picking the same thing you picked, even though it's a great pick. And again, I just mentioned them. Ottawa's my pick again because it was year one for them. It was really the first time they got to play at home. It was a bunch of really new stuff. Bobby Brown did a fantastic job. There was a lot of kind of surprise guys there. But as we know, consistency is very difficult in Indy ball. That's why when we find 4 or 5 guys that are like that, we really hammer home like, this is a guy. This is a dog. This is the guy you want. This is the guy to watch. There's a reason why we constantly hammer those guys. And this was a team in Ottawa that wasn't the best pitching, but they got by on it. They got by on some really good batting performances. So I'm very interested in seeing in 23, are we going to go ahead and have this same kind of performance? Are we going to get those same kind of guys that come out of nowhere and do it? Are we going to get those repeats? What's the boots on the ground reality for Ottawa going to be in 23? So I'm going to say Ottawa, although I think you make a lot of really good points about New Jersey.
Yeah, I think both are going to be really interesting. I think both are good choices, and I think the storyline of is Ottawa a 1-year fluke, or are they a legitimate contender that's going to stick for a few years in the East is a really important one too.
Absolutely there. And so with that, we have one question left, which is always kind of the bonus one, and I guess I kind of reversed the two of them if you want to get down to it, which is just who's the most intriguing from 22? You know, we said what's going to be the most intriguing thing or best to preview for 23, but let's keep it on 22 for just one more second before we turn the page on the Frontier League for the next little bit. Who is the team in 22 that was the most interesting and most intriguing?
Oh, most interesting team in the East Division in 2022. I mean, I honestly think that No, I'm going to say the Boulders. I'm going to say the Boulders were the most interesting team, just because with Stanton there, and they were they were an entertaining team for sure. They could hit the snot out of the baseball. So I would say the fact that they hadn't been to the playoffs in quite a few seasons, and they hadn't had a lot of success. I think that it was an important year for the Boulders this past year, and I think they were the most intriguing team and interesting team looking back. Especially, you don't get much more interesting than a wild goose chase at the end of the year for those last 2 spots, and you have the Boulders coming out as the 2 seed because they won freaking 12 games in a row to end the season. So I don't think it's much more interesting than that.
See, there's a couple ways I could take this. And like what you said about the Boulders is certainly one way. You could say the same thing about Ottawa because of their crazy run. You could say Tri-City because they dug themselves a hole and they nearly managed to climb out of their own grave. And that's interesting. You could say the Miners because they just kind of slowly started to fade and you were like, are they going to have enough to get there? And then it's just the tide caught them. But I'm going to take it another direction. I'm going to say Empire State was the most intriguing and most interesting because of how bad they were. And we genuinely thought at several points they bottomed out and then they just kept digging deeper. And then we were like, there's no way in hell you could bring this thing back. And then they're like, Mark Mason's our new manager. We're running it back year 2. So like for me, again, I have to just focus on 22 to only win 6 of 96 games. It's just like impressively bad. And so there was a couple of moments where I was genuinely invested. Are they going to pull this off or not? And like, I think we all kind of low key rooted for them to set the loss streak and then immediately get the win. But even still, they were interesting because they were just a storyline and not for the best way. So I'm going to say Empire State because I'm taking this in another direction.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's certainly. I think that's fair. They're very intriguing to say the least.
Yeah.
So I'll give it to you.
All right. And so on that note, let's plug this show and get out of here because we've gone on for about 2 hours and 40 minutes at this point.
Holy crap.
I honestly don't know if I should break this thing into two or if I should just leave and say, have fun with a 3-hour episode. But we're going to find that out. I may put up a Twitter poll about this.
Yeah, I was about to say, put up a Twitter poll. And see, you can put a Twitter poll, Instagram poll, do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm putting up a poll on this. You guys are going to find out if this thing got cut into two or not when we find out if it gets cut into two or not. But with that said, the one place you'll be able to find out for certain is its social media and all the things we're about to plug, which is to say, you can find us on Twitter at Indy Ball Pod. You can find us on Instagram at ALPB_news and at Indy Ball Report. Keep your weathered eye on both of those because we're going to post a bunch of polls and a bunch of stuff and everything that you need to know about whether 204 is going to wind up being 204 part 1 and 2, or if it's just going to be 204 and it's going to be pushing 3 hours long. I'm going to warn you now, as you probably already know if you got this far and we didn't cut it. That being said, you could also find every episode, the show notes that we mentioned earlier, as well as the article I kind of sort of teased and announced, I guess, earlier in the show on the website, indyballreport.com. Be sure to go there, check everything out. It's all available there. And if you don't want to go there, you don't want to go to Twitter, you don't want to go to Instagram, you could just find the show itself on just about every podcast platform, which is TuneIn, it is Stitcher, it is Spotify, it is Podbean, it is Apple Podcasts, it's Google Podcasts, it is Amazon Music, it is anywhere and everywhere you can find podcasts. And with that said, as we approach the 2 hour and 45 minute mark, do we have anything else left to add in this behemoth of an episode and recording session?
No Rutgers rant this week. I will save it for next week. All I gotta say is, if this is one episode and you listen to all of it, God bless you.
Really,
you are amazing.
Yeah, this would definitely set our record for longest episode, and it probably would do it by a clean 15-minute mark. Like, it would just hurdle this. This
is a legendary one. This is one for the books of a episode that we're recording in the middle of the night when I'm driving from Boston to Long Island.
And we managed to kill the entire length of the drive and possibly a little bit more.
Nick, hold on. I'm going to literally let you know the second I am turning onto my street.
I'm going to wait until you play the point.
Turning.
I want to say we recorded the whole length of this drive because essentially that's what we did.
I'm turning. Just got to back it up a little bit and straighten it out.
Oh, God. We just got to finish the Meadow Soprano parking session.
Are parked.
Oh, my God.
There it is.
We have podcasted the length of essentially Boston, Massachusetts to Hempstead, Long Island. Fantastic.
That is legendary. All right, pardon my French. That's legendary shit.
It absolutely, I feel almost obligated to put this out as one full episode now because it dullens the feat if it's done in 2 parts. And so if this thing comes out and it's 6 o'clock at night, I want you to know what happened was we didn't finish recording till 10 after 2. I wound up sleeping till 1, started editing it, and didn't get done until 5. So that would be the reason behind it. This is a historic feat. I'd say I have something to add, but quite frankly, after going on this long, I don't think we have anything else left to say. And until next week, don't forget to play ball.